Since they already had a path of retreat, it was inevitable that the various forces would have their own plans. Since the flaming frost realm could not be saved, then why would they still have to spend so much effort on it? Every time Hysteria's troops attacked, even if they were suppressed by the power of dimension, it would still lead to some wounded and even dead, which Heavenly Venerate was willing to die. Very naturally, the various forces became more and more passive in the resistance against Hysteria. On the other hand, the number of Heavenly Venerates they sent to battle at the profound negative realm was gradually increasing. For a force to be able to prosper eternally, it was definitely not something as simple as needing one or a few top-notch elites to keep watch, but rather the addition and rise of new blood was the key, and this required a massive amount of resources. Where did the resources come from? Territory, of course. The more territory they occupied, the greater their gains would naturally be. Furthermore, the profound negative realm would be upgraded from a high-level dimension to a transcendent dimension. In between, there would be massive changes in the heaven and earth, and observing the changes in the dimensional core at close quarters would be greatly beneficial to any Heavenly Venerate. Moreover, after upgrading, the profound negative realm would also produce a great number of natural treasures. In fact, even treasures that would be useful to Heavenly Venerates would appear. For these reasons, even Heavenly Venerates couldn't maintain their composure. They had to quickly stake a claim to the territory. Ling Han suspected that the Flaming Frost Realm would not be able to last for 100 billion years at all at this rate. Perhaps, within 50 billion years, 30 billion years, or even less time, the Flaming Frost Realm would collapse and become fertilizer for Hysteria to strengthen itself. But even if Ling Han or those around him worked hard, it would be useless. There were too many Hysteria troops. Even if it was Lin Yulian or the like, the result of taking them head-on would definitely be the latter being blasted into dust. In the end, even the 6th-tier elites spoke up, strictly controlling the number of Heavenly Venerates that entered the profound negative realm. They indeed needed Heavenly Venerates to help speed up the devouring process of the profound negative realm, but if the Flaming Frost Realm fell because of this, and the profound negative realm had not matured yet, that would be great trouble. Since the 6 tiers had spoken up, the situation became slightly better. However, there were still forces that secretly arranged for Heavenly Venerates to go to the profound negative realm. It was just that they were not as brazen as before, and their numbers were also controlled. Ling Han returned to the front lines and fought against the Hysteria army together with his family, brothers, and friends. He moved out alone and carried out a decapitation mission. Right now, his strength had further advanced, and added with the fact that he had formed real dimensions, he was filled with confidence. Fu Yuan and the others wanted to go together with him, but Ling Han rejected their offer. If he was alone, he could come and go as he pleased. He arrived at the enemy camp and did not hide his tracks. In any case, after so many attacks, Hysteria's army was already extremely heavily guarded. No matter how he disguised himself, it would be useless. There was only a simple word for it: kill. Ling Han charged into the enemy camp with his battle prowess on full throttle, unleashing a great massacre. The Hysteria army immediately rioted, and countless attacks poured towards Ling Han. Wang, wang, wang. The powers of dimension in Ling Han's body channeled like a millstone, dispersing the majority of the attacks that were fired at him. However, the numbers were really too high and too concentrated, and there were still a great many attacks that could not be dispersed. After a round of attacks, Ling Han almost threw up blood. Fuck, it had only been 10 million years or so since they had last fought, and the attacks of these guys had actually become so fierce? Ling Han was sure that if it were not for the fact that he had the powers of dimension in his body to disperse attacks, even a 6th-tier elite would probably throw up blood and be injured under the combined barrage of so many attacks. It wasn't that Ling Han was more powerful than a 6th tier, but rather that when faced with a large number of attacks, the power of dimension had an advantage in dispersing them. On the other hand, if a 6th tier were to directly attack Ling Han, then even if the power of dimension absorbed 50% of the attack, it would still cause serious injury to Ling Han. In fact, it might even kill him directly. Ling Han released a battle cry, unleashed the 9th-grade combination seals, and charged towards the enemy's leader. He was invincible, and no monster could stop him. The leader monsters were already prepared. The moment Ling Han entered, they would retreat. No matter what, they had to maintain an absolute distance from Ling Han. On the other hand, a tidal wave of monsters filled the hole, using their bodies of flesh and blood to block Ling Han. Though Ling Han was aggressive, there were really too many enemies. Furthermore, with thousands of attacks blasting at the same time, it also made Ling Han feel like he was under a mountain of pressure, and he thought of retreating. I haven't tried out my new move yet, Ling Han thought. A large part of the reason why he had come here was because he wanted to test out the might of those 13 dimensions in actual battle. Go! He shouted lightly, and the projection of a dimension immediately shot out. It was infinitely enlarged, and a frightening pressure instantly descended. At least tens of thousands of nearby monsters were affected, and couldn't help but bow. It was not that they wanted to submit to Ling Han, but rather that the pressure was too great, forcing them to bow. Pung, pung, pung. However, these monsters were extremely ruthless, so how could they possibly compromise so easily? A great many monsters that had spare energy immediately moved, blasting towards that dimension. A third-tier Heavenly Venerate could destroy a low-level dimension, a fifth-tier Heavenly Venerate could destroy a medium-level dimension, and this dimension that Ling Han projected was only medium-level, so how could it withstand the combined attacks of innumerable fifth-tier Heavenly Venerates? Very soon, multiple cracks appeared, and then it turned into innumerable pieces with a bang. Ling Han was completely unconcerned. He had already taken advantage of the opening to cover a large distance. Then, with a wave of his right hand, dimensional projections shot out again, and this time the number had reached as many as 3. Boom, even fifth-tier monsters were affected. Even if they did not bow, they could feel their bodies become heavier. Ling Han continued to advance, and he was already getting closer and closer to his target. The monsters all attacked at the same time, and the projections of the 3 dimensions very soon exploded. However, when Ling Han released another 5 projections of dimensions, he had already reached the target monster. He shot out a punch, bringing with it an amplification of more than 200 times in power. Pong! It was only a single punch, and the target monster was instantly crushed into dust. Ling Han turned around without hesitation and locked down on the second target monster. Would he be able to kill another? Though he was presently very relaxed, that was because the dimensions in his body were showing their might, suppressing many monsters, but after the projections of the dimensions were destroyed, they would need time to reform. He had already used up 9 dimensions and only 4 remained. Let's give it a try. Ling Han charged over again. The projections of the 4 dimensions were channeled at the same time, suppressing innumerable monsters, while he took advantage of the opening to madly charge towards the second leader monster. He unleashed his full power, channeling the 8th grade seals. His power increased by close to 1,000 times, and his speed also received an astonishing increase. When the 4 dimensions were destroyed, Ling Han had also arrived in front of his target. As usual, he threw out a punch. Pong! The monster was killed without a doubt. Amidst an army of thousands, it was a piece of cake for him to take the enemy commander's head. Ling Han laughed loudly, his heroic spirit soaring, but in the next instant, he had already torn open a rip into the void and directly fled. The remaining 13 dimensions had already been used up. If he didn't leave now, what else was he waiting for? Was he waiting to be beaten up? He entered into the void and couldn't help but feel rueful. No wonder Zhou Heng, Lin Xiaoyang, and the others all said that the best path should be to place dimensions inside one's body. It was indeed awesome. The terror of dimensions lay in their size. When a dimension crashed down, it was enough to impede tens of thousands of heavenly venerates of the same level at the same time. If that was not the case, what would qualify Ling Han to kill the enemy leader in the midst of an army of 10,000 on his own? To say nothing of him, even Lin Yulian and Xian Chihu couldn't do it. I only have 13 dimensions. What if I can have 130 dimensions, 1,300 dimensions? Ling Han thought to himself. He couldn't help but be captivated and aspire for this future. At that time, even if he fell into a siege of Hysteria's army, there would be no need for him to enter into the void. He only had to release one dimensional projection after another, and he would be able to suppress these monsters to the point that they could only sprawl out in submission. Even the projections were like this, so what about the dimension itself? Just how many times would its might increase? This could not be easily attempted because if the projection had exploded, so be it. Could be used again after a few months or years. However, the dimension was different. This was the foundation. If the foundation was completely gone, how could there be a second time? Thus, this is my trump card. Unless absolutely necessary, I will definitely not use it, Ling Han thought. On the other hand, I still have to improve my cultivation level as soon as possible and increase my capacity to accommodate dimensions. He was just about to tear a rip into the void and return when a feeling of extreme unease suddenly rose up in him. Shwa! In the void, a whip-like shadow whipped over. It was hysteria. This was still not hysteria's main body, yet gave Ling Han an incredibly realistic feeling, oppressing him to the point that even breathing was difficult for him. He suddenly had an instinctive feeling that this was hysteria using the power of dimension to suppress him. It should be known that not only was hysteria the strongest elite in the world, it was also a dimension itself. Ling Han could use the dimensional projections to suppress others, so why couldn't hysteria do the same? Not only could it could even do it better than Ling Han. It could do it 100 times better, 1,000 times better than he could. The two sides were not even on the same level at all. Though it looked like a whip-like shadow was whipping over, there was a dimensional projection within. It was equivalent to a transcendent dimension suppressing him. What kind of concept was that? In the past, though hysteria had also attacked Ling Han before, it actually had not had any killing intent. Its purpose had only been to awaken him. However, this strike was completely different. It was intended to kill him. It was clear that hysteria didn't have any intention to save Ling Han. Since he had already betrayed hysteria, it wouldn't hesitate to erase him. The number one elite in the world had moved. Even if it was only a doppelganger, who could block it? It would have to be a sixth tier at least, right? Ling Han did not hesitate in the slightest. Wang, wang, wang. The 13 dimensions in his body were all unleashed, forming a shield in front of him. Even fifth-tier elites would be affected by the dimensional projections. Now, however, not only were 13 dimensions appearing at the same time, but they were also dimensions proper. The might of these dimensions had increased by at least 10 times, and the shield that they formed was most likely impenetrable. Pung, pung, pung. However, with hysteria's attack, the 13 dimensions instantly exploded into pieces. They were only able to stall it for a sliver of time. This bought Ling Han an instant, and even made him throw up blood madly. The dimensions crumbled, and he, as the main body, was naturally implicated as well. However, he did not even pause, and used this instant to tear a rip into space and return to the Genesis world. Wah! He began to spit out large mouthfuls of blood, and his face instantly became incredibly pale. His whole person was lying on the ground, and he did not want to move a single muscle. The dimensions that he had painstakingly nurtured had been obliterated. This caused too much damage to him. He cast his gaze internally. Thankfully, though the dimensions had been blown apart, there was still a sliver of residual power left behind. This could still allow him to slowly restore the dimensions, but everything would have to start from the beginning again. His hard work of the last 10 million years was completely wasted. Damn it! Ling Han sat up in a cross-legged position and drew out a great herb. This was a recovery-type great herb. Crack! He took a bite and tried his best to recover as soon as possible. After a whole 3 years, he had finally recovered a little. He stopped and began to ponder. How did hysteria find me? I've already erased the mark it left in my body. If it could still find me, why didn't it appear after I have traveled through the void so many times before? This time has been so coincidental. This is practically an ambush set up for me in the void? Could it be that someone leaked my whereabouts? Ling Han was shocked. If that was not the case, how could there be such a coincidence? But who had leaked the secret? It should be known that there were over 100 undercover agents in the Flaming Frost realm, so could it be one of them? However, not many people knew that he was going to battle this time. Aside from the Empress and the other women, the Rain Emperor, the Black Donkey, and the Karmic Life Heavenly Venerable, no one else knew. Additionally, there were also his comrades, Bai Meifan, Fu Yuan, and Xian Feng. If there were any more, it would be Lin Yulian, Xian Chihu, and Wu Haoyang, the three commanders-in-chief. Whatever mission Ling Han and his group wanted to carry out on the battlefield, they would definitely have to make a report. If there was an undercover agent, he would have to be among these people. Ling Han immediately excluded the Empress, the Black Donkey, and the others. They had walked with him all the way here, and he had absolute trust in them. Then that would be among these 6 people. Bai Meifan, Fu Yuan, Xian Feng, Lin Yulian, Xian Chihu, and Wu Haoyang. However, Lin Yulian and the other 2 greatest prodigies of all eternity were descendants of 7th tiers, so the possibility of them becoming Hysteria's subordinates was close to 0. Of course, it was also possible that Xian Chihu collaborated with Hysteria just to get rid of Ling Han. Thus, the most likely candidates were these 3 people: Xian Chihu, Fu Yuan, and Xian Feng. Ling Han did not want to doubt his own comrades. Hence, he was more inclined to believe that it was Xian Chihu who had leaked the secret. For the sake of killing me, this person is really willing to do anything, even disregarding his bottom line? Ling Han thought. He continued to recover from his injuries, and after another few decades, he finally recovered. However, the dimensions that had been destroyed would need to be nurtured again and reformed. This was tens of millions of years of hard cultivation. He returned to the realm battlefield, and had not even had the chance to talk about his own matters when he received an earth-shattering piece of news. A change had taken place in that group of lost primitive dimensions. The Empress and the others had not left yet, and had been waiting for Ling Han to return. What happened? Ling Han asked. We're not sure either, but it's said to be extremely shocking. Let's take a look. Ling Han and the others set out. After merely over a dozen years, they had once again arrived at the group of lost primitive dimensions. There doesn't seem to be any change. Ling Han swept a glance over. This place was just like how it had been in the past. It was just that countless ruins and devastation had been left behind because veins of or had been excavated. Pong! Just as he said this, a pillar of light rose up in the distance, breaking through the barrier between dimensions and causing an explosion in the void. Ling Han was instantly shocked. The energy in this pillar of light is too terrifying. It has reached the 6th tier, at least. Hunyo cocked her head and said, could it be that this is an energy storm that has rushed out of the 9th and 10th dimension? Was this possible? The Empress nodded. At present, the ground layer here has been excavated, forming a great many passageways. It would not be strange for the energy storm to be able to go through and exit. Wang! A terrifying aura swept past, spreading out for millions and millions of kilometers. Ling Han, the Empress, and Hunyo all felt their chests become muffled, and almost lost control of their power, toppling down from the skies. The 3 of them were astounded. Just what kind of terrifying aura was this that it could actually have such a terrifying effect on them? However, this aura had disappeared after a single sweep. So this is the change? This aura is too terrifying. It's at least a 6th tier elite, but this is clearly a deadland, so where did a 6th tier elite come from? Don't tell me that there are still living 6th tier elites buried underneath. Ling Han thought for a moment, then shook his head and said, that's not very possible. Senior Zhou and the others have already explored the 9th dimension, and all the veins of or should have been swept clean, and it is impossible for anything to be left behind. If there's a 6th tier elite hidden in the 10th dimension, even Senior Zhou and the others can't enter there. So how can he release his aura? The 3 of them looked at each other and came up with a bold guess. Don't tell me that there are still 7th tier elites sleeping here, and they're about to awaken. If this was true, then this would be a really huge matter. The 7th tier was considered the strongest in the world, indestructible and undying. Alright, one had died, but Ling Han had absolutely no idea how he had been killed. If a 7th tier were to appear, then if they did evil, the whole Genesis world would suffer. The party observed here, and discovered that that aura from before appeared again after 67 days. It was incredibly terrifying. However, the next time only 66 days had passed, and this aura appeared once more. Next, it was 65 days, 64 days, and 63 days, and the intervals became shorter and shorter, causing Ling Han and the others to feel even more uneasy. If this was an elite slumbering, then this aura was becoming more and more active. The time for his emergence should be drawing closer and closer. They ventured deep into the 8th dimension and observed it from a close distance. However, they could only sense the vastness and majesty of this aura, yet still couldn't find its source. After a few days, Zhou Heng, as well as 3 other 6th-tier heavenly venerates, came out of the 9th dimension. Senior Zhou. Ling Han hurriedly went up to greet him. Have you discovered anything? The source comes from the 10th level, or perhaps even the dimension below it, Zhou Heng said solemnly. Underneath this, it's extremely likely that a living 7th-tier elite has been buried. Previously, a 7th tier had also been unearthed from raw stone, but that was a corpse and now it was a living 7th tier. The significance was completely different. Brother Zhou, will you ask your master to make a trip here? A 6th tier elite beside them asked. He was Rong Tianyu, an ally of Lin Xiaoyang, Zhou Heng, and Chu Hao. Zhou Heng nodded. This matter is too important. Even if master does not come personally, he will at least have to send out a doppelganger. No one thought that this was an exaggerated measure. The emergence of a new 7th tier elite was too shocking. More and more people arrived. Zhou Heng and the other 6 tiers even made arrangements to set up a base here because if that newly emerged 7th tier elite bore malicious intent, he should be suppressed. Even if he couldn't be killed, he would be eternally sealed here. 6 tiers couldn't do it, so Lin Luo, Bai Fan, Xi and Fu, and the other 7th tiers all sent out a doppelganger, which meant that the greatest power of heavenly venerates of the entire Genesis world was gathered here. As for Hysteria's troops, forget about them for now. Under the suppression of the dimension, the defenders only had to leave behind a small number of troops, and they would be able to resist. This place was too crucial. 13 days, 12 days, that aura appeared more and more frequently. Finally, it appeared a few times in a single day, and the ground began to tremble, as if all the dimensions were about to collapse. 7th tier elites possessed such power. He's about to emerge, Zhou Heng murmured, frowning deeply. Though there were presently as many as 76 tiers here, and there were also at least 5 doppelgangers of 7th tier elites, they might still be unable to suppress a real 7th tier elite. No one was certain of that. A 7th tier was too strong. Having fused 6 fundamental powers together, he was definitely invincible. Only a 7th tier would be able to stand against another 7th tier. This was an ironclad rule. Pong! 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 When this aura fluctuated like the breathing of an ordinary person, drum-like sounds rang out, causing pain to everyone's ears. Some people were even bleeding from their 7 apertures. It should be known that this was the 8th dimension. Those that could come here all had battle prowess on par with 5th tier elites. Even such elites would be shaken to the point of bleeding from his 7 apertures, and it was merely because of a sound? This was far too terrifying. Xiao, 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 Xiao. 5 figures appeared, all of them exuding boundless light. Their appearance could not be clearly seen at all, but the moment they appeared, that drumbeat immediately became smaller, and could no longer cause any effect. These were the doppelgangers of 5 7th tier elites. Ling Han rubbed his nose. He wasn't bleeding so terribly from his 7 apertures, but it was inevitable that he would have a nosebleed. He couldn't help but feel shocked. Even the 7th tier elites had been mobilized, so was there really a 7th tier elite about to appear? Would the secrets of this lost primitive dimension that had been sealed for countless years finally be unraveled? Pong! A pillar of light rose into the sky, and the terrifying aura instantly soared madly like a tidal wave. The 5 7th tier elites all took a few steps back, and actually looked like they were outmatched. Could it be that this 7th tier that had not emerged was strong to this extent? Of course not. It was because these 5 supreme beings were only doppelgangers. No matter how strong doppelgangers were, how could they compare to the original? Sigh! A long sigh rang out in everyone's mind. After a long dream, eternity will pass. Reminiscing the mortal world, epochs pass like dreams. A figure slowly walked out from underground, calm and composed. However, when he appeared in the center of the masses, no one could see his true appearance. His whole body was enveloped by boundless light, and even the vision of sixth-tier elites couldn't see through this light. What is it? Putting on such a grand display? Are you planning to kill me? This person's eyes swept over the surroundings, and he couldn't help but laugh loudly. His voice was like thunder, shaking a great many people to the point that they stumbled, and could not stand steadily no matter how hard they tried. So this was a seventh-tier ultimate elite? He was too strong, having such might with just a laugh. If he really attacked, how could even sixth-tier elites withstand his strike? How should I address you, sir? A seventh-tier elite's doppelganger asked, not knowing who he really was. At present, even sixth tiers were not qualified to speak. They could only play the role of spectators on the sidelines. Me? The newly emerged seventh tier chuckled. He stretched out his arms and drew on the fundamental power of heaven and earth. A smile appeared on his face. As expected, the void is indestructible, and life is reborn from death. Sir, who exactly are you? Another seventh-tier elite's doppelganger asked. Oh, if I don't say anything, could it be that you guys plan to compel me? The newly born seventh-tier chuckled, completely unconcerned. Seventh-tier elites were undying and indestructible, and even against hysteria, they didn't need to fear. Whom did they need to give face to? Old friends, all of you, wake up! The seventh tier shouted lightly, and his palm delivered a palm strike onto the ground. Boom! Not only was this dimension trembling violently, but the seventh and sixth dimensions were also trembling under the transmission of power. Moreover, the power was still spreading upwards. Similarly, the power was also spreading downwards, reaching the ninth dimension, the 10th dimension, and even further downwards. After only a short while, for extremely terrifying auras spread out. Everyone inhaled sharply at the same time. Could it be that there was more than one seventh tier buried here? Pong! 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 Beams of light continued to shoot out from the ground. 1, 2, 3, 4, there were a total of 4 beams. Then, 4 figures walked out of the pillars of light. They were all enshrouded in boundless light, and their appearance could not be seen clearly. However, every single person was exuding a great aura that could crush the heavens, and even the doppelgangers of those 5 seventh-tier elites were no match, appearing to pale in comparison. Seventh-tier elites, there were actually 5 seventh-tier elites. How were they supposed to suppress this? To say nothing of the fact that there were only 5 seventh-tier doppelgangers, even if Lin Luo, Bai Fan, Lin Luo, and the other seventh tiers personally came here, they would not be able to accomplish this at all. Old friends, we finally meet again. The seventh-tier elite who was the first to emerge exclaimed with emotion. I am not the slightest bit happy to see an old shameless rascal like you. I am not the slightest bit happy at all. A seventh tier immediately said. Hee, how long are you two going to bicker for? A third seventh-tier elite said with a smile. He looked at the doppelgangers of Lin Luo and the others. Friends, may I ask if extermination has already appeared? Extermination? Lin Luo and the other seventh-tier heavenly venerates were all confused. What the heck was that? Oh! The third seventh-tier elite revealed an expression of realization, though no one could see it. He laughed loudly. My title is Chong Yen. These 4 old friends are Big Dipper, Shatter Mountains, Mysterious Feather, and Half Moon. He pointed at the 4 newly emerged seventh tiers one by one, paused, and gave everyone a buffer time. Then he said, I know what you guys want to ask, and that is the origins of the 5 of us old geezers. Hee. We do not come from this world or this era. Seeing everyone's confused expression, he continued, to put it simply, before this world was born, we already existed. Fuck! Hearing these words, everyone felt their scalp go numb with shock. Were these 5 seventh tiers monsters? They were even older than Genesis world itself? But the problem was, who would be able to cultivate to the heavenly venerable tier without the support of dimensions? Could it be that these 5 people were seventh tiers from the moment they were born? Though there is no accurate accounting, the Genesis world has existed for about 3,000 epochs, Lin Luo said. Friend, what you mean is that before the Genesis world appeared, there was another world, and you guys were living in that world? Clever! The heavenly venerate Big Dipper clapped his hands. The place that you all are standing now is the world that we used to live in. These overlapping dimensions were actually another Genesis world. Heavens! Hiss, it was no wonder that the dimensions overlapped with each other, which was extremely inconceivable. According to deductions, at least a few hundred 7th-tier elites would have to act to be able to make two dimensions overlap each other. However, for this kind of practically endless overlapping of dimensions, it was certain that no matter how many 7th-tier elites there were, they would not be able to accomplish this. However, the Genesis world itself was like this, so that would explain things. Then how did the world of our friends become like this? Fan asked. This place was in ruins, completely destroyed and devastated. Could it be that a conflict had erupted among the 7th tiers, causing the whole Genesis world to collapse? That's because of extermination. Heavenly Venerate Chong Yen sighed. This is an indescribably powerful being. Not only has it cultivated to the 7th tier, it has even manifested into a dimension and started the realm war, swallowing countless dimensions. What? Everyone couldn't help but look at each other. Wasn't this referring to hysteria? And then, Lin Luo asked in a very serious manner. Everyone's heart clenched. The answer from Heavenly Venerate Chong Yen might be the key to dealing with hysteria because these 5 great Heavenly Venerates were still alive, but extermination was no longer wreaking havoc. Obviously, they had won. Afterwards, Heavenly Venerate Mysterious Feather shook his head. Let's call it Genesis world as well for now. We fought against extermination together with the Heavenly Venerates of all the dimensions, but still we could only retreat slowly. The transcendent dimensions were continuously falling. Though we created new transcendent dimensions, extermination also became stronger and stronger. The speed of our creation was already unable to keep up with the rate at which it was devouring. Heavenly Venerate Half Moon continued. In the end, we were forced to fight a battle to the death. We detonated the cores of all dimensions and launched the final and strongest attack against extermination. Though this destroyed extermination, our world has also completely collapsed, which has also had a massive impact on us. Heavenly Venerate Shatter Mountains said. He stretched out a finger and pointed. Our world was originally the same as yours, and only became like this after the collapse. According to our deductions, the Genesis world was nurtured by the void. As expected, after countless epochs, a new Genesis world has appeared again. Heavenly Venerate Chong Yen said. As everyone listened, they all felt their scalp go numb. As it turned out, they had been born in a new world after the old world had been destroyed, and before that, a being like Hysteria had almost devoured the old Genesis world. Ling Han thought of that 7th tier's ancient corpse. Could it be that he had been killed by the power of the Genesis world's collapse? Otherwise, what other power could kill a 7th tier? Previously, extermination had been so strong, but hadn't it also been blown apart? Lin Luo obviously thought of this as well and began. We once excavated an ancient 7th tier's corpse. That's Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand. Heavenly Venerate Half Moon sighed. At the time, someone had to restrain extermination, so Brother Yellow Sand took on this mission single-handedly. As a result, he was also swept by the power of the dimensional explosion, and his mind exploded. No wonder. It was said that 7th tier was immortal and indestructible, but with the destruction of the Genesis world as the price, this burst of attack would have already surpassed the limits of 7th tier. Friends, though we do not have extermination, we do have hysteria, Xianxia said. He briefly introduced hysteria to them. This is extermination. Chong Yen and the other Heavenly Venerates exclaimed simultaneously. As expected, extermination is too strong, and even an explosion of the dimensional core was unable to kill it. Heavenly Venerate Big Dipper said, the boundless light flickering all over his body, and showing the intense fluctuations of his emotions. Hysteria is extermination? Everyone was stunned. If that was really the case, that would be too terrifying. Sacrifice the entire Genesis world to unleash the strongest attack, yet that is still unable to kill it. Just look at Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand, who was also a 7th tier, yet was deader than dead. Was hysteria indestructible? No, Lin Luo said. If hysteria is extermination, then it was also born over 100 epochs ago. Why had it also been so late? It must have also suffered severe damage in the previous world's destruction. Who knows? There might have only been a tiny bit of remnant soul left behind, and that is why it needed so many years to recover, and only then did it manage to make a comeback. That's right. Bai Fan, Xian Fu, and the other 7th tiers all nodded. Even Chong Yen and the other veteran 7th tiers expressed their agreement. Otherwise, hysteria wouldn't have needed to endure for so many years. It could have directly swallowed the Genesis world when it had been first born, and there wouldn't have been so much trouble now. Even so, could it be that it wants to destroy the world again and die with it? Destroy the Genesis world again. Everyone shook their head. There would probably be no one aside from the undying and indestructible 7th tier 7th elites that could escape alive when the dimensions crumbled. That's right. When detonating the cores of all dimensions, aside from 7th tiers, there is no one who would be able to survive that. Heavenly Venerate Chong Yen nodded. Furthermore, since extermination has fallen for it once, I'm afraid it won't repeat the same mistake. After a round of conversation, everyone also found out that though these 5 7th tiers were the strongest in their era, under the impact of the Genesis world's destruction, they had also suffered heavy injuries and were forced to enter into a state of slumber. They felt as if eternity had passed, and only now did they awaken and re-emerge in the world. Both sides were the strongest in the world, but hysteria had awakened before them, and it had suffered an equivalent of a burst of attack caused by the entire Genesis world exploding. With such a comparison, hysteria's terrifyingness was fully displayed. It couldn't be killed no matter what, and it was also powerful to the extreme. How could they not be afraid? Looks like we have to work together, Heavenly Venerate Chong Yen said. N. Lin Luo, Bai Fan, and the other 7th tier elites nodded. Their interests were the same now, and even if they couldn't defeat hysteria with the addition of 5 7th tier supreme elites, at least their strength would be greatly boosted, and they would be able to last for a longer time. Please return with us, friends, Xian Fu said. All right. Everyone returned to the flaming frost realm together. With the intervention of 7th tiers, their speed was naturally astonishingly great. In a few years' time, they returned to the flaming frost realm. Chong Yen and the other supreme elites all sensed the power of this dimension. They weren't from this dimension, and in fact weren't even from this Genesis world. Thus, they needed to once again grasp the unique power of dimension here. For a 7th tier, having one more or one less such power wouldn't have much effect, but it was always good to strengthen oneself, even if it was only a bit. My 5 friends. Shall we now go to see some old friends? Lin Luo asked with a smile. Before that, we have one more thing to do, Heavenly Venerate Chong Yen said. The 5 7th tier elites moved at the same time, but there were specks of light flickering on their palms, and the whole sky was filled with them. They were both beautiful and stunning. The light of life, Lin Luo and the other 7th tiers all exclaimed. It contains the mark of life, and can nurture new life. Heavenly Venerate Chong Yen nodded and said, the Genesis world was destroyed, and aside from 7th tiers who are undying and indestructible, no other life form could possibly survive. Only the mark of life could be preserved in the mind of a 7th tier, and only then would there be a chance for rebirth. For a living being, the most important thing was memory. In other words, it was the mark of life. The body itself was actually not all that important. Now, the 7th tier elites extracted the boundless power of heaven and earth to construct a new bodies for these marks of life. Life was the manifestation of regulations. The heavenly venerable tier was superior to regulations, so creating life was naturally a small matter. However, without the mark of life, the life created by a heavenly venerate would also have no intelligence, and would need a long time to slowly evolve and form. Witnessed by countless people, the power of heaven and earth gathered on the spots of light. One after another, living beings came from nothing, forming out of thin air. There were humanoid shapes, as well as those of beasts and birds. When they took form, they were at the Celestial King tier. There were first Heaven Celestial Kings, and there were also ninth Heaven Celestial Kings. Heavenly Venerable tier surpasses regulations, but because we are too powerful, we cannot be reformed by regulations. Hence, the light of life cannot be left behind so that we can obtain rebirth. Either. Heavenly Venerate Chong Yen said calmly, seemingly feeling very regretful. Everyone felt the same. If the Heavenly Venerates of the other Genesis world could be brought over, then their strength would undoubtedly increase greatly. Though we are all seventh tiers, the light of life that we can preserve is also limited, Heavenly Venerate Half Moon said. However, these are all the greatest prodigies of all eternity. The majority of them could have long since become Heavenly Venerates, but for the sake of preserving some chance of life, they have not broken through all this while. Throughout such a long time, their souls have also been cultivating and improving. As long as they possess a real body, they would be able to experience a great breakthrough in a short period of time. Boom! Just like an explanatory note for his words, a ninth Heaven Celestial King actually advanced to the Pseudo-Heavenly Venerable tier easily, and was instantly targeted by the heaven and earth. Lightning struck madly, yet he easily dispersed it. This was too terrifying. To say nothing of how long he had been accumulating power at the ninth heaven for, this could only bring him appreciation. He did not have the slightest understanding of the flaming frost realm at all. Now, once he had obtained a new body, he had completed his breakthrough. This was too terrifying. Just how great was his natural talent in cultivation. Ling Han also looked over, and saw that this was a young man that looked like a god. He had long golden hair, exuded a soft luster, and was indescribably handsome. And he himself was exuding a kind of power, a grand power, the power of the world, as if he was the son of destiny. Merely standing there, he had become the center of the heaven and earth, attracting everyone's attention. Feng Wuding was the strongest prodigy of our world. Moreover, when the Genesis world collapsed, an inheritance mark flew out and landed on Feng Wuding's light of life. Heavenly Venerate Chong Yen said with a hint of envy. A seventh tier was already standing at the pinnacle of the world, truly invincible, undying, and indestructible, yet he was actually envious of Feng Wuding, which showed how amazing this great luck was. But when one thought about it, it made sense. Obtaining the inheritance mark of the Genesis world, what kind of concept was that? If we want to completely eliminate extermination, the present hysteria, Feng Wuding is the key, Heavenly Venerate Half Moon said. As long as he matures, he'll possess the great power of the Genesis world, and perhaps this can really be realized. When everyone looked at Feng Wuding again, their gazes had changed completely. Envy, jealousy, hate. All these emotions filled their eyes. At this point, let me give you a warning first. Heavenly Venerate Big Dipper suddenly said, his voice cold and sharp. The inheritance mark of the Genesis world cannot be snatched. If anyone wants to kill Feng Wuding and snatch his inheritance mark, it is destined to be a pointless effort. They would be destroying the only chance to destroy hysteria. And I will also crush that person's bones into dust. There was no need for a seventh-tier Heavenly Venerate to threaten anyone at all. Who would not revere him? But Heavenly Venerate Big Dipper had still deliberately said this, which showed just how important Feng Wuding was. Everyone nodded internally. This mark should indeed not be taken away. Otherwise, why would a seventh-tier elite not take it for themselves? Friends, let's go and meet hysteria. We haven't seen it for so many years, and we still miss it quite a bit. Heavenly Venerate Shatter Mountain said. The 5 of them had already completed the creation of life, and there were instantly more than 10,000 celestial kings here. Zhou Heng, make the necessary arrangements, Lin Luo said to Zhou Heng. He paused for a moment before continuing. Hysteria has sensed something, and is currently launching an attack. We need to return to our positions and resist with all our might. Understood, Master. Zhou Heng nodded respectfully. Xiao. The 10 seventh-tier elites left, leaving behind those who had yet to regain their breath. The amount of information that they had received was really too great, and they needed time to digest it. Before their world, There had actually been another world. Had there not been over 10,000 celestial kings born here, everyone would have assumed it had just been a dream. Come with me, Zhou Heng said to Feng Wuding and the other celestial kings from the previous Genesis world. No, it's better to come with me, another sixth-tier elite said. Stepping out from the crowd, he added, if you come with me, I will nurture you all with as many resources as you desire. Are you saying I can't promise them that? Another sixth-tier elite asked. What was the most important thing in this world? The strongest elites, as well as fresh recruits with unlimited potential. All of them had originated from the previous Genesis world, and being selected meant that they were all the cream of the crop. While maybe not all of them would become a seventh tier, getting to fifth tier was no problem at all. This was especially the case for Feng Wuding, the strongest prodigy in the previous Genesis world. He had received the inheritance from the previous Genesis world, and was even likely to surpass the seventh tier in the future. Just how important was this? If any force were to add these geniuses to their ranks, they would definitely be able to become the strongest faction in the entire Genesis world in the future. As such, even sixth-tier elites were all desperately vying for talent. One after the other, the sixth-tier elites showed their sincerity as they extended the olive branch to the potential recruits. The celestial kings were tempted. The other party was all sixth-tier elites after all. No matter if it was the previous Genesis world or the current one, they were all close to the strongest level possible. As such, the celestial kings quickly made their decisions. However, the most sought-after talent, Feng Wuding, remained quiet. It was not that no one had invited him. On the contrary, a prodigy from the previous Genesis world like him was surely more coveted than the rest. However, he remained unperturbed, and didn't deign to make his decision too lightly. Evidently, he was still testing the waters, and wanted to see which side would be able to give him the better offer. However, Lin Xiaoyang, Zhou Heng, and Chu Hao didn't participate in this competition for fresh talent. Even though each faction needed new blood to bolster their forces, the same rules didn't apply to seventh-tier forces. It was because seventh tiers were completely indestructible, and never had to worry about the day they would wilt and die. Lin Luo was the perfect example of standing guard for eternity. Even if the Genesis world were to be destroyed, he had a high chance of surviving it. Why the heck would he ever need any fresh recruits then? Moreover, Zhou Heng, Chu Hao, and even Lin Yulian had a high chance of reaching the seventh tier. Thus, they didn't need to go through so much trouble. Ultimately, Feng Wuding decided to join the World Alliance where Yu Borong was at. Ling Han was shocked as Yu Borong had a blood debt with him. Would this mean that Ling Han and Feng Wuding would become enemies from now on? Ling Han was filled with excitement at the prospect of battling such a genius and seeing how high his battle prowess was. After the recruitment, all the heavenly venerates returned to the realm battlefield. Battling hysteria was the main priority, after all. Ling Han went back to his daily life of either cultivating or killing on the battlefield. He wanted to take on another decapitation mission and figure out which of the people around him was the spy. However, he didn't want to take the risk. What if he were to get ambushed by hysteria? This time, he wasn't sure he would be able to escape with his life so easily. As long as the spy was not found, he could not rest. Because they had just retreated to the Flaming Frost Realm, and had the advantage of dimensional suppression, they were able to buy themselves around 2 million to 3 million years of time. Everyone was making the most of that time by intensely cultivating. The geniuses from the previous Genesis world were truly extraordinary. In just a little over 100,000 years, at least 1,000 new heavenly venerates had cropped up among them. However, Feng Wuding was still surprisingly a pseudo-heavenly venerate. This strongest prodigy was also blessed by the heavens. Previously, he had managed to gain the upper hand with a show of strength. Why couldn't he do the same now? When he found out about this, Ling Han said, I think this is what makes Feng Wuding so terrifying. To a genius like him, the question isn't about becoming a heavenly venerate, but rather how can he become the strongest heavenly venerate? The Empress replied, You're saying that he didn't advance to become a heavenly venerate in order to accumulate strength? Ling Han nodded. I think so. Now I'm even more excited to face him in battle and see how strong he actually is. Another several hundred thousands of years had passed. More and more geniuses from the previous Genesis world had become heavenly venerates. After all, the reason they were chosen was because their potential was among the highest there was, and with them accumulating strength over countless epochs, it was not surprising to see them soar so quickly. Moreover, the various great forces spared no expense at cultivating these new recruits. Back when they had been unearthing raw stones, they had been able to obtain many great herbs. While some of them had been used up, a large portion had been saved up. These were ultimately used to cultivate these young talents. In just the span of 2 million years, the quickest among them had already risen up to the 3rd tier, with many following behind. It was truly astonishing. At this moment, Feng Wuding finally broke through and became a 1st tier. The second he did, he challenged a 3rd tier heavenly venerate to a battle, and managed to end the battle with a draw. Everyone was completely flabbergasted by the result. To be able to battle someone 2 entire levels higher than him, Feng Wuding was too powerful. Even Lin Yolian and Xianxia couldn't compare. "I think Ling Han can do that too," someone mentioned Ling Han. "Humph. How can Ling Han possibly compare with Feng Wuding?" Feng Wuding was not only the strongest prodigy from the last Genesis world, he even managed to get its inheritance. He's already this powerful after stepping into the heavenly venerable tier. He is sure to become much stronger in the future. That's right. He is the heir of the Genesis world and the son of destiny. In the future, he will definitely reach greater heights than the 7th tier. Everyone concluded that Ling Han was no match for Feng Wuding. This had been decided by fate. When Ling Han caught wind of the rumors, he simply gave a light laugh. He wouldn't try to bully someone weaker. If Feng Wuding was to catch up to him in terms of cultivation level, then he wouldn't mind sparring a little. On the other hand, Feng Wuding simply scoffed. "Oh? There was someone else who can battle someone 2 levels higher." He smiled. "Once I enter the 3rd tier, I'll take him as my servant." His words were full of contempt towards Ling Han, which was then repeated verbatim by a servant. Soon, the news spread across the realm battlefield. Hunyo was completely furious. She wanted to go find Feng Wuding and give him a good beating. However, the latter was in the midst of cultivation somewhere else, so she couldn't seek him out at all. Truth be told, aside from Feng Wuding, all the other geniuses from the previous Genesis world were arrogant and thought little of this generation's prodigies. Even though both sides had not had any major conflicts yet, there were plenty of minor scuffles. A day would come when these minor scuffles would escalate into a full-blown battle. In the next 1 million years, Feng Wuding would display his terrifying potential. Not only did he rush up to 3rd tier, he was just inches away from becoming a 4th tier. The day had also finally come for him to enter the realm battlefield. The entire base erupted with excitement when they heard the news. One was the strongest prodigy from the previous Genesis world, while the other was the unbeatable monster from the current generation. Now that the 2 of them were about to come face to face, which of them would be the stronger one? Everyone was filled with anticipation towards this battle. Ling Han was hated by many, but everyone had to admit that this guy was incomparably freakish. When he was a 3rd tier, he already possessed 5th tier battle prowess, and he could come and go as he liked through Hysteria's base, killing countless enemies. Feng Wuding, a prodigy from the Genesis world of the last era, had even obtained the inheritance of that Genesis world. Although no one knew what this so-called inheritance was, Feng Wuding was definitely extremely powerful. When he was in the 3rd tier, he, too, could match a 5th tier, which was sufficient to prove that his strength wasn't inferior to Ling Han's. Previously, the 2 of them were already at each other's throats, provoking each other from afar. It was believed that the first thing Feng Wuding would do upon arriving at the realm battlefield was to challenge Ling Han to prove that he was the strongest prodigy in history. However, unexpectedly, despite Feng Wuding having already arrived at the base camp for 3 days, he didn't seem to have the slightest intention of challenging Ling Han. Everyone was dumbfounded. What was going on here? Yet someone had guessed Feng Wuding's thoughts and said, "This must have been deliberate on Feng Wuding's part. He does not take Ling Han seriously, and disdains to challenge him at all." Was that indeed the case? "Ling Han, that brat looks down on you so much. Can you really tolerate that?" The large black dog came over to find Ling Han. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "So what about it? Should I go and challenge him?" "Go on." The large black dog nodded. "That brat is so arrogant. So how can we not teach him a lesson?" Ling Han shook his head. "He did it on purpose. He wants to elevate his own status. So why should I help him to accomplish his goal?" The large black dog thought about it and agreed. Ling Han's reputation was earned through battle and had long since received public acknowledgement. Despite Feng Wuding's starting point being very high, he didn't have any astonishing battle merits after all. If Ling Han was to challenge him first, then Feng Wuding would be able to make a move which would naturally raise his reputation to the next level. He is truly too shameless. He actually wants to use my little Han's name to ascend to a higher position. No way. Grandpa Dog is going to teach him a lesson. The large black dog ran off angrily. The two supreme prodigies did not exchange blows, but there was a considerable number of skirmishes between the Ling Alliance and the World Alliance. Whether it was at the realm battlefield or in the profound negative realm, a considerable number of battles had erupted between both sides, with each side sustaining victories and losses. Feng Wuding, on the other hand, was really calm and composed. He didn't make a move all this while, making a display of his attitude to the maximum. However, the conflict between the two major forces became more and more intense. Not only did the conflicts become more frequent, but more and more people got involved. It wasn't until one incident that finally made Ling Han furious. Ling Shi and Fu Tianxing were not at the realm battlefield. The couple was responsible for expanding the territory in the profound negative realm, but they were ambushed by the World Alliance, resulting in the two of them being severely injured and almost unable to return. Family and friends were Ling Han's bottom line. Previously, he had been negotiable in all aspects, and treated this kind of conflict as a kind of training for everyone, but now the actions of the World Alliance had gone too far. Ling Han, the Empress and Hu Niu both looked at Ling Han. "Let's go." Ling Han stood up, his expression dark. "Where are we going?" "To the World Alliance." The three of them walked out of the house and headed in the direction of the World Alliance. Despite this being the realm battlefield, the various great forces still divided their territory. One would be here while the other would be over there. Usually, every force would mind their own business and stay in their own lane. If anyone was to rashly barge into the territory of another force, the lightest punishment would be being banished and kicked out, while the heavy punishment would be getting thoroughly beaten. There was nothing else that could be done. Previously, in order to contend for heavenly venerable seals, an irrecoverable barrier had already formed among the great heavenly venerates. How could they treat each other as brothers just because they were now fighting side by side? Although close to 90% of the heavenly venerates had gathered here, it was completely silent beneath the city wall. The majority of them were cultivating in their own residences, trying to make themselves a little bit stronger in preparation for the next wave of attack from Hysteria's army. Perhaps one would be able to survive just because one became a wee bit stronger. The city wall was very long, but with the pace of heavenly venerates, it only took a while to close the distance. In under 30 minutes, the trio had already arrived at the territory of the World Alliance. Ling Han stopped in his tracks and did not continue forward. He turned around. On one side of the city wall, there was a large group of buildings, which was the territory marked by the World Alliance. Ling Han strode forwards, heading towards the group of buildings. Immediately, someone shouted, "Halt!" Had they walked by the city wall, no one would have cared, but it was different here. This was the territory that had already been demarcated by the World Alliance. Ling Han looked over in the man's direction. "Wu!" That person immediately clutched at his chest with one hand, and blood was dripping from all his apertures. This man was only a ninth heaven celestial king, so how could he possibly withstand the might of his gaze? If it were not for the fact that Ling Han did not want to kill him, this guy would have already died. Even so, he had also been severely injured. Without a few 100 million years of rest, it would be impossible for him to recover. Ling Han continued to walk forward, but immediately 3 more people jumped out and appeared in front of him. However, these 3 people did not make a move because they knew who Ling Han was. They were definitely no match for him. Ling Han, How dare you barge into the territory of the World Alliance? A second-tier heavenly venerate called out. Ling Han looked towards this heavenly venerate and did not speak, but a frightening aura spread out, bearing an indescribable pressure on that person. Ah! The second tier screamed involuntarily and staggered a few steps backwards, also bleeding from all his apertures, having been severely injured. In front of Ling Han, what difference was there between a second tier and a ninth heaven celestial king? Both would be unable to withstand even a single strike. This astounded the other two people. Not everyone had personally witnessed Ling Han's powerful battle prowess, and they kept feeling that the rumors were slightly exaggerated. How could a third tier be as powerful as this? Now that they had seen it with their own eyes, they realized that Ling Han was indeed freakish, even surpassing the rumors. They didn't dare to say anything else. Who would want to suffer for nothing? In any case, they were no match for Ling Han. And since they were no match for him, what need was there for them to seek their own suffering? Pong! Pong! However, Ling Han had no intention of letting them off the hook. With a punch, the two of them were instantly sent flying through the air, knocking down who knew how many walls along the way. The two of them were extremely depressed. They had not spoken out of turn, so why did they still need to suffer a blow? Didn't you come here to find foam wooding? Why did you make a move on them? They couldn't get up, as they were already severely injured by Ling Han's strike. Ling Han's expression was cold. He had not come today to spar with foam wooding and see who was the strongest prodigy in history. He had come to beat someone up to vent his anger. Shio, shio, shio. More heavenly venerates leaped out, surrounding Ling Han, yet none of them made a move. Even in the World Alliance, there were not many fifth-tier heavenly venerates. The rest were mediocre, so how could they possibly stop Ling Han? Hence, not a single one of them sought their own humiliation. Ling Han clenched his right hand into a fist and threw out a punch. What? You actually dare to take the initiative to attack? How arrogant! Everyone was exclaiming in shock. They had not thought that Ling Han would be so arrogant, and would be so overbearing even when he had barged into the territory of the World Alliance. They all moved to parry, but even if there were several dozen heavenly venerates, taking this blow head-on still forced them all backwards. Why was it so difficult to advance to the fifth tier? This was because one would have surpassed the fourth tier by who knew how many times in taking this step. When Ling Han threw out a punch, his fist was unstoppable. Ling Han, as one of the greatest prodigies of all time, why are you bullying someone weaker? A voice resounded, and in that instant everyone was on edge. It was the mystic snake heavenly venerate, a fifth tier. Ling Han narrowed his eyes at the middle-aged man slowly approaching with a smile as the crowd dispersed. The massive image of a snake over several hundred meters long hovered behind him. The sight of it was terrifying. Boom! Without saying another word, Ling Han struck out with his fist, condensing his energy into a massive fist that hurtled towards the mystic snake heavenly venerate. The mystic snake heavenly venerate was furious as he thought, "This is too much. How could you just attack without warning? Have you no dignity? We both possess a fifth tier's combat prowess and are almost at its peak. Yet we're still having to fight like we're street thugs?" Despite what he thought, he still had to meet Ling Han's blow. As one of the 9 strongest individuals of the Alliance, he of all people could not back down. Pong! He managed to parry Ling Han's punch, but quickly lost balance and fell back over 10 steps. Everyone from the World Alliance was stunned by the turn of events. The Mystic Snake Heavenly Venerate was a middle-stage 5th tier, and with neither side using any heavenly venerable seals or secret techniques, and only fighting with their original strength, he had actually been pushed back. It was clear that Ling Han possessed abnormal strength for a 3rd tier. "You've gone too far," the Mystic Snake Heavenly Venerate barked. Activating his Heavenly Venerable Seal, his power instantly surged by 40 times. Boom! His aura became even more formidable as the giant snake image behind him started to take on an almost physical appearance as though it was coming to life. He charged out towards Ling Han and punched with his right fist. Boom! The giant snake image also rushed forth viciously to bite down on Ling Han. Wang! A seal was also shining on the giant snake, giving it an astonishing aura. This was a secret technique, and it was where the mystic snake Heavenly Venerate got his name. Ling Han was unperturbed. All secret techniques were just different applications of the same power. If one's power was great enough, they could overcome anything. Simple, direct, and overbearing. Ling Han punched back in retaliation, activating his own heavenly venerable seal simultaneously. Pong! As their fists collided, the mystic snake Heavenly Venerate spat out fresh blood and was sent flying. A first-grade seal, he yelled. His battle prowess wasn't low, but the difference in their heavenly venerable seals was too great. Show! Ling Han rushed forth in pursuit of the mystic snake Heavenly Venerate. He was planning on completely putting down every single person from the World Alliance. Pong, pong, pong! Ling Han launched successive punches, completely suppressing the mystic snake Heavenly Venerate. Soon, the latter was covered in injuries. Everyone was completely flabbergasted. Initially, they had a lot of confidence in Feng Wuding. However, if even a fifth tier was suffering like this, was there anyone else who could stop Ling Han? Stop! A deep voice resounded, and soon 8 figures appeared. These were the other 8 fifth tiers from the World Alliance stationed here. When they say how badly the mystic snake Heavenly Venerate was getting beaten, they had to step in. Otherwise, the World Alliance was going to become a laughingstock. The mystic snake Heavenly Venerate was relieved. If the 9 of them were to join forces, they were sure to be able to take Ling Han down. However, Ling Han pretended not to hear anything and continued to pummel him. Pong, pong, pong! The mystic snake Heavenly Venerate continued to suffer massive injuries to the point where he couldn't help but cry out in pain. It was utterly embarrassing. Ling Han, you've gone too far. The other 8 fifth tiers were furious and struck out simultaneously. All those who could become Heavenly Venerates were prodigies in their own right. Moreover, reaching the 5th tier was not something anyone could do even if they had several epochs worth of time. With 9 such powerful individuals joining forces, even any 5th tier would probably feel frightened. However, Ling Han was not worried. So what if there were 9 of them? He quickly activated a dimensional projection to suppress them. After so many years, he had not only managed to develop all 13 dimensions, even his physique had improved further now because of his reaching late-stage 3rd tier, and he was able to contain up to 19 different dimensions. He was confident he could take the mystic snake Heavenly Venerate and the rest by surprise and make them suffer if he were to release all 19 dimensions from the start. However, it was better not to reveal all his cards too early. It was more than enough to activate a single dimensional projection. Even if it was just a projection, it was more than terrifying enough. The mystic snake Heavenly Venerate and the rest were all groaning and looked to be in pain. Dimension suppression. Destroy it. All 9 Heavenly Venerates shouted as they joined forces. Pong, pong, pong. As they bombarded the projection with attacks, cracks quickly appeared on its surface, and it was ultimately destroyed. However, Ling Han took advantage of the opening and launched another attack. Upon supplementing his fists of fury with the 1st-grade seal, his attack was nigh unstoppable. With a single punch, he sent one of the 5th tiers flying. In the time it took for the dimensional projection to be destroyed, Ling Han had already sent 5 Heavenly Venerates flying. Gasp! Everyone from the World Alliance was flabbergasted. It was no wonder Ling Han was able to come and go as he pleased within Hysteria's army base. His abilities were too powerful. Who among the 5th tier was able to stop him? Could Feng Wuding do it? They were all confident at first, but now they were beginning to doubt it. Pa pa pa! The sound of clapping hands echoed as a golden-haired man walked over. Like an emperor, there was a boundless aura about him, giving him a presence that would make others prostrate themselves before him. It was Feng Wuding, the strongest prodigy from the Genesis world of the last era. You've got some skills, said Feng Wuding. With an indifferent expression, he continued, Ling Han, you've finally come to challenge me. As if. Ling Han shouted as he charged forward. Challenge? Bullshit, he was here to deliver a beating. With the support of a 1st-grade seal, Ling Han's battle prowess was terrifying. As indifferent as he might seem, not even Feng Wuding was able to stand idle against it. he said angrily. "Don't assume you're the only one with a first-grade seal." An ancient and powerful aura began to circulate Feng Wuding as he activated his own first-grade seal, increasing his power by 80 times. He met Ling Han head-on, completely unafraid. There was no arguing that Feng Wuding was an extraordinary existence in his own right. A few 100 million years ago, he was still a ninth heaven celestial king. Now, he had not only reached the third tier, but was at its peak, surpassing Ling Han in terms of cultivation level. Not to mention, he had the support of a first-grade seal. However, his battle prowess was still just roughly the same as Ling Han's. What? Feng Wuding couldn't accept what happened. His cultivation level was slightly higher, but his power still ended up in a draw against Ling Han's? Impossible. Impossible. He was the strongest prodigy in the Genesis world of the last era, and enjoyed the benefits entitled to that position all to himself. There was none who could compare to him, yet how was he unable to best Ling Han? Even people like Lin Yolian and Xianxia could only overcome an opponent who was a single cultivation level higher than themselves, and they were called the greatest prodigies of all eternity. However, compared to him, they were just average prodigies. How was Ling Han able to be this strong? Could it be that he extracted too many powers of dimension, enabling him to gain the upper hand in strength? This was not impossible. Normally, extracting the power of dimension from roughly 100 dimensions was enough for one to fight against a prodigy who had created a dimension within their body, even if they hadn't reached the third tier. If they extracted upwards of 1,000 dimensions, they could even put up a fight against a fifth tier. That must be the case. Feng Wuding's confidence was reignited. He released a battle cry. It was all right. His advantage lay in the fact that he had more power behind him. At present, he was only slightly inferior to Ling Han. When he advanced to the fourth tier, he would then be able to surpass Ling Han. At the very least, they would be evenly matched. When he advanced to the fifth tier, he would be able to suppress Ling Han in terms of raw power. "Take a finger from me," he said balefully. He gave a tap with his finger, and endless brilliance condensed at the tip of his finger, pressing down towards Ling Han. This attack was extremely terrifying, as if even the defense formed by a sixth tier could be easily shattered. Ling Han's gaze became focused. This tap was indeed extraordinary, condensing all of Feng Wuding's power into a single point. The destructive power naturally increased by tons. This was a very simple thing to say, and anyone could easily think of it, but the power of Heavenly Venerable Tier was already incredibly condensed, and to compress it further to a single point was really too difficult to accomplish. Feng Wuding being able to do this was indeed very impressive. However, could he become the strongest prodigy of the Genesis world of the last era and even obtain the inheritance of Genesis world just because of this? Ling Han shook his head. This was definitely not enough. He condensed fists of fury and charged ahead to block Feng Wuding's attack. Pu, 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 Pu. After a few consecutive attacks, multiple bloody marks instantly appeared on Ling Han's fists. Those were marks that had been forcefully created, but Feng Wuding did not seem to have the upper hand, either because his finger had twisted strangely. With the head-on clash, the bones in his finger had also been dislocated, and there were even some fractures in his bones. Feng Wuding finally withdrew the last shred of his pride and looked at Ling Han solemnly. Even the eternal destruction finger could do nothing against this opponent? This finger technique was something that he had comprehended through countless epochs of deep slumber, and was integrated with some kind of mystical power of the Genesis world. In the battle against Ling Han, he actually couldn't gain even the slightest bit of upper hand? He was filled with extreme jealousy. Even if he was confident that he would be able to crush Ling Han when he advanced to the fourth tier or fifth tier, he actually did not manage to suppress Ling Han in a battle of equal cultivation levels. Instead, he was at a slight disadvantage, which actually made him extremely jealous and resentful. "Humph! Then let's have a competition based on background," he declared. The two of them exchanged blows, and after more than an hour, the first-grade seal that Ling Han had augmented his power with had already finished releasing its energy. Immediately, it dimmed. However, because Feng Wuding had moved later, this seal of his could be channeled for another 15 minutes. Ling Han smiled calmly. "Wang, All the ninth-grade seals lit up, instantly boosting his battle prowess by more than 200 times. Feng Wuding was greatly shocked. He never thought that not only did Ling Han possess a first-grade seal, he also had a complete set of ninth-grade seals. The might of this far surpassed a first-grade seal, and under the strike of 3 consecutive punches, Feng Wuding was throwing up blood. "Don't think that you've won," he roared in fury. "Wong, wong, wong, wong." For seals lit up on his body at the same time, and a terrifying aura spread out. His battle prowess soared, instantly reaching the point where he could rival Ling Han. Pong! The two of them exchanged blows, yet it was hard to decide who was the stronger one between them. Ling Han's eyes involuntarily narrowed. These were actually another 4 first-grade seals, and they were combination seals at that. However, this was slightly worthy of Feng Wuding's identity as the strongest prodigy of the Genesis world of the last era. "Let's battle it out." The two of them continued to exchange blows, but their raw power was more or less equal, and the heavenly venerable seals were also more or less equal in amplification, so it couldn't be decided who was the stronger one between them no matter what. Humph! Feng Wuding's eyes sharpened, and his right hand tapped towards Ling Han. Wang! A shadow appeared, turning into a world. Dimensional projection. This wasn't strange. Top-notch prodigies would definitely nurture dimensions in their bodies. This was a sustainable path, unlike with the Empress, who was extremely strong at first, but she would slowly be caught up with by others as her cultivation level increased. Boom! The dimensional dimension pressed down. Though its power wasn't extremely overbearing, it was still a dimension after all, so it brought overwhelming pressure. Ling Han also channeled a dimensional projection to meet this oncoming attack. Pong! Although the collision of 2 dimensions wasn't exactly real, with the condensed power of the heavenly venerates, it was half real and half solid, and therefore still extremely terrifying. Under the clash of such violent impact, both of them were knocked backwards, but they immediately came charging back and fought fiercely. "There's more!" Feng Wuding roared. He actually channeled another dimensional projection. Ling Han was not surprised. As long as a 7th tier lent a helping hand, a supreme prodigy would be able to nurture 2 dimensions. Ling Han wasn't inferior either and channeled a 2nd dimension. Pong! The 4 dimensions collided, and the ensuing shock wave was naturally even more terrifying. What? These 2 people can actually nurture 2 dimensions inside their bodies. Teach this, no wonder these 2 people can battle those surpassing their cultivation level. I heard that even those incredibly freakish prodigies could only accommodate a single dimension. How impressive indeed! Everyone was exclaiming in shock. As the commotion caused by the battle was too great, it had also attracted people from other forces. In fact, Lin Yulian, Xianxia, and Wu Haoyang had all been alerted. However, the 3 of them did not step out to stop the battle. They, too, wanted to know just how strong Feng Wuding, the son of destiny of the Genesis world of the last era, was. "Did you think this was my limit?" Feng Wuding sneered. Wang, he launched another dimensional projection. The 3rd one. Everyone inhaled sharply. Feng Wuding actually had a 3rd dimension. This time, even Lin Yulian and the others, as well as by Maifin who had rushed over later, revealed shocked expressions. They knew very well that even if a 7th tier elite lent a helping hand, that would only allow outstanding prodigies like them to possess a 2nd dimension. 3 dimensions. This was unprecedented, and perhaps it would never happen again. Ha 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 ha. Ling Han, how are you going to match that? Feng Wuding laughed loudly. Wasn't being suppressed by 3 dimensions impressive enough? Everyone was rendered speechless. Feng Wuding was too impressive indeed, as expected of the son of destiny of the Genesis world of the last era. "Hold on," someone suddenly said. This was a 5th-tier heavenly venerate of the World Alliance. His voice was actually a little shaky. "Don't forget, when Ling Han and I were fighting, he has already used a dimensional projection once. Of course, dimensional projections could be used again and again, but the problem was that the dimensional projection previously had already been destroyed by them. If Ling Han wanted to condense it again, that was definitely not something that could be done in a short while. Since Ling Han had already channeled 2 dimensional projections, then added with the previous one. Hiss! The heavenly venerates of the World Alliance were all stunned. Ling Han wasn't the slightest bit inferior, and also possessed 3 dimensions. If Feng Wuding was the son of destiny of the Genesis world of the last era, then was Ling Han the chosen one of the present Genesis world? Ling Han smiled calmly as he channeled another dimensional projection. Pooh! Bai Meifan instantly spluttered. He possessed 2 dimensions, and this was something that he had always been proud of. However, he had never seen Ling Han channel a dimensional projection before, and thought that Ling Han had walked the path of accommodating power of dimensions in his body. Now that Ling Han was stronger than him, he would definitely surpass him in the future. It had never occurred to him that not only did Ling Han walk the same path as him, but he even had to look up to him. 3 dimensions. The members of the World Alliance were even more stunned because they knew that this was actually the 4th dimensional projection that Ling Han was unleashing. A monster, he was truly a monster. The clash between the 2 great prodigies was a great eye-opener. It turned out that the number of dimensions that the body of a heavenly venerate could contain was not 2, but could reach as many as 3. Feng Wuding was also stunned. He had not expected that there would be another that could accomplish the same feat aside from himself. Do you think that this is my limit? He shouted loudly, and the 4th dimensional projection suppressed down. Fuck! 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 At this, everyone's mouth was gaping as they were completely rendered speechless. For dimensions, how was this done? Meanwhile, Ling Han smiled faintly. For dimensions, and this just barely had the feeling of a son of destiny. However, compared with the tens of thousands of infant dimensions inside his body, this was no big deal. Limited by the cultivation level, even Ling Han couldn't possess millions and millions of dimensions. Right now, he only possessed 19 dimensions. The problem was, what was Feng Wuding's limit? Ling Han was a little curious, but was completely unconcerned. He had not come to spar with him, but merely to deliver a beating. Boom! In a single breath, he channeled another 5-dimensional projections. Pooh! Everyone spluttered. There was nothing wrong with their eyes, right? How could they have seen an absolutely impossible feat? 8 dimensions. Feng Wuding was instantly suppressed and continuously forced backwards. Even his back was bent under the pressure. The suppression from 8 dimensions was too strong, and even he could not bear it. But in the next instant, he roared furiously, and a majestic power surged out of his body. Wang, wang, wang! A total of 10 dimensions appeared around him. This was his true trump card, 10 dimensions, unprecedented in history, a supreme miracle. Everyone was also dumbfounded. Ling Han was already overwhelmingly strong, possessing 8 dimensions, which they didn't even dare to imagine. However, Feng Wuding was actually even more freakish, advancing another 2 steps further from the impossible. This was the son of destiny. Suppress! Feng Wuding charged over with the projections of 10 dimensions, his might unmatched. At the level of 5th-tier battle prowess, who could stop him? Ling Han was still silent. He merely clenched his right fist. Wang, wang, wang! Another 3-dimensional projections were activated, instantly turning the tables. This? Everyone couldn't wrap their head around this. So what if they were heavenly venerates? This had instantly broken the iron rule that had existed throughout eternity. So who could still remain calm? 11 dimensions, were you trying to defy the heavens? The members of the World Alliance were even more stunned because they knew that the number of dimensions that Ling Han truly possessed would have to be increased by 1. Feng Wuding was also rendered speechless. He was favored by the heavens, and there were actually more than 10 dimensions that could be easily accommodated in his body. However, limited by his cultivation level, he presently could only allow 10 of these dimensions to grow. Though Ling Han only had 1 more dimension than he did, he was still overwhelmed, and there was no way he could catch up. Ling Han penetrated deeply, bringing the 11 dimensions and firmly suppressing Feng Wuding. Everyone was dumbfounded, and then felt rueful. The son of destiny of the Genesis world of the previous generation was inferior to Ling Han. As expected, it was this guy that was even more freakish. A great many people felt a sense of pride. After all, Ling Han was one of their own. Feng Wuding was a remnant of the Genesis world from the last era, and no matter what, he should be considered an outsider. If it were not for hysteria, they would even have come to blows. After all, the ancient newcomers could also be considered as invaders. Feng Wuding humphed and didn't say anything else. He simply continued to exchange blows with Ling Han. He indeed had one less dimension than Ling Han for suppression, but he was only slightly suppressed, but it was not to the extent that he would be overwhelmed. Hence, he could still bear it. He was defiant. He had placed his hopes of victory on exhausting Ling Han's heavenly venerable seals, which would result in his battle prowess dropping drastically. And he still had another trump card. His battle prowess was outmatched, so it was inevitable that he would be hit a few times, causing him to feel great pain, and a strong sense of humiliation rose up in him. He was a supreme prodigy that could surpass his cultivation level and defeat a superior opponent, but now, in a battle of equals, he was actually still being suppressed. However, 2 hours were about to pass. As expected, the light of the seals on Ling Han's body dimmed one after another, and his battle prowess also ebbed considerably. Haha! What is the meaning of background? This is what background means. Feng Wuding laughed loudly. Boom, another 3 seals lit up on his body. They, too, were supreme and could crush all life. First-grade seals. Heavens, not only did he have 8 first-grade seals, he could even form 2 sets of combination seals. 1 set of 3 and another set of 4. This allowed his battle prowess to increase by more than 170 times. He still maintained the standard of crushing all with 5th-tier battle prowess. Now, how was Ling Han supposed to block this attack? Everyone shook their head. Who would have thought that Feng Wuding would actually have mastered 3 first-grade seals, and could even combine them? This kind of battle prowess could sweep aside all with 5th-tier battle prowess. Boom! Feng Wuding's palm struck towards Ling Han. Ling Han let out a battle cry, and the 8th-grade seals lit up one after another. However, he controlled them and only channeled half of them so that the increase in battle prowess was only about 500 times. But was 500 times not enough? Pong, pong, pong. Ling Han completely overwhelmed Feng Wuding, throwing furious punches one after another, and blasting Feng Wuding like he was a scarecrow. He could only be sent flying continuously. Feng Wuding was completely stupefied. The reason why he could possess 8 first-grade seals was because he had obtained them through the inheritance of Genesis World from the last era, but he had already expended 1 whole set of Ling Han's 9th-grade combination seals, and he was actually still overwhelmed by Ling Han? He could not accept this. Perhaps he couldn't accept this fact, but it couldn't change the fact that Ling Han's battle prowess was overwhelming. Feng Wuding could only be pummeled. I forfeit, he declared reluctantly. But he had even less desire to have Ling Han continue pummeling him like this. His arrogance did not diminish, and he thought that this was only because his cultivation level was still too low, so he could not make full use of his full advantage as the son of destiny. For example, there were a total of 100 dimensional seeds in his body, but now he had only developed 10 of them into dimensions. As long as his cultivation level increased, his ability to battle above his cultivation level could at least be maintained, if not improved. Moreover, everyone knew that once the cultivation level increased, the ability to battle above his cultivation level would definitely decline. One declined while the other maintained this ability. In a battle of equal cultivation levels, who would win? Revenge was a dish best served cold. A man who knew when to yield and when not to yield was a true man. Pong! However, he had just finished his words when a heavy punch landed on his face, causing his nose to bleed. You! Feng Wuding roared loudly. He had already admitted defeat, so why didn't Ling Han stop? Who would spar like this? Pong! He suffered another punch. You have gone too far. Feng Wuding was filled with fury. Do you think I have come to spar with you? Ling Han finally spoke. Is that not the case? Wrong. I have come to deliver a beating. There is no difference between you and those nobodies, so don't think too highly of yourself. Ling Han said coldly as he continued to throw punches. What bullshit, son of destiny. Trash. These words were too hurtful. Feng Wuding wanted to die. He had a high opinion of himself, and thought that he was the son of destiny. No one could compare to him. However, Ling Han didn't take him seriously at all, and ignored him completely. This kind of disdain was something that he could not tolerate. Yet Ling Han did not care. Just like he had said, he had only come to deliver a beating. Who cared if Fong Wuding admitted defeat, or if he was pleased or not? There was only one word for it: thrash. In full public, Fong Wuding, the son of destiny of the Genesis world of the last era, was thrashed madly and completely humiliated. Everyone was rueful. The Genesis world of the previous era ultimately represented the past. In this era, they would still have to depend on the son of destiny of this Genesis world, and this person, from the look of things, was Ling Han. Ling Han showed no mercy and thrashed all the members of the World Alliance, inflicting serious injuries. Then, he emptied out all of their spatial tools, and only then did he stop. He obtained a considerable number of great herbs, which were the benefits bestowed by the World Alliance. These heavenly venerates had been saving them up, and in the end, they had all benefited Ling Han. To dare ambush my daughter, you guys are really courting death, Ling Han said menacingly. This was the realm battlefield, and killing was forbidden. If not for that, these people would have long since died. The members of the World Alliance could only groan in pain. There should be no one with 5th-tier battle prowess capable of defeating Ling Han, unless a 6th tie made a move. However, because the environment here had evolved, even if a 6th tier came, his cultivation level would still be suppressed. He would probably only be delivering himself up to die, and would not be a match for Ling Han at all. Heh! So awe-inspiring, Xianxia said coldly. Ling Han, don't you know that private battles are forbidden here? Ling Han turned to look at him, and felt that this so-called greatest prodigy of all eternity was extremely disgusting. Ling Han could not even be bothered to speak nonsense with him. When he had enough strength, he would just directly beat him till the latter burst. The coldness in his expression caused Xianxia to fly into a rage, and he immediately stepped out. Ling Han, you dare to look down on me? He moved and pressed out his right palm. Boom! 6th-tier power blazed out. This power was too great. Ling Han could not possibly match it, but before he even retreated, Lin Yolian had already moved and stood in front of him. Her delicate hand waved lightly and dispersed this blow from Xianxia. Brother Xian, calm down, she said calmly. Move aside. Xianxia's gaze was menacing. Lin Yolian had tender features, but her expression was extremely determined as she said, Brother Xian, enough is enough. What do you mean by enough is enough? Xianxia laughed loudly. His figure shot out and charged towards Ling Han. You've gone too far. Lin Yolian waved a sleeve, stepping forward to meet Xianxia's attack. The two greatest prodigies of all eternity began a fierce clash, both unleashing their full battle prowess. Hong, long, long. The heaven and earth trembled. Thankfully, this place had already become the realm battlefield. Ordinary people would have long since evacuated. Otherwise, if they fought like this, who knew how many ordinary people would suffer? Even so, Ling Han and the other elites with 5th-tier battle prowess had no choice but to retreat as well. The aftermath was extremely terrifying, and there was no need for them to face it head-on. After fighting for half a day, Xianxia finally stopped. As fellow greatest prodigies of all eternity, Xianxia couldn't do anything to Lin Yolian, and Lin Yolian couldn't do anything to him, either. Unless they really fought with their lives on the line, it would be impossible to determine the victor even if they fought for 100 million years. Xianxia looked menacingly at Ling Han. He did not hide the killing intent in his eyes at all. Previously, he had kept it hidden and used a decapitation operation to lay a trap for Ling Han. But looking at his present expression, if he had a chance to make a move, he would kill Ling Han without hesitation. Ling Han was fearless as he looked into Xianxia's eyes. Worst come to worst, he could just tear a rip into the void and leave. As long as he advanced to the 4th tier, he would be able to completely match Xianxia, and if he became a 5th tier, beating up Xianxia would definitely be as easy as a father beating his son. There was a ball of anger in Ling Han's heart. Xianxia could be so unrestrained, but wasn't it all because he had a higher cultivation level and greater strength? I want to become stronger. I want to become even stronger. Ling Han clenched his fists, and shouted in his heart. An incredibly desperate need for strength rose up in him. Everyone gradually left. Because unity had long since crumbled, the rules of the realm battlefield weren't so strict anymore. As long as no one was killed, no one would pursue the matter. Thus, the matter of Ling Han destroying the World Alliance was also set aside in confusion. Actually, there were only a few people and forces that really wanted to pursue the matter with Ling Han. The majority still hoped to see Ling Han mature. Ling Han had only collected some interest this time. He knew that the cause of the trouble lay with Yu Borong, who wanted to avenge the death of his son, and that was why he had deliberately targeted the Ling Alliance. This debt would be remembered. Time passed quietly, and as the environment of the realm battlefield became more and more neutral, Hysteria's army attacked again, setting up camp in the distance, ready to launch a fierce attack at any time. However, because the timing and location were still leaning in favor of the Flaming Frost Realm army, Hysteria's army chose to stay put. Just at this moment, news came again from the Genesis world of the last era. Previously, hadn't there been people who stayed there, wanting to find any raw stones that they had missed? Not too long ago, someone had actually entered into the 10th dimension. Was this a 7th tier? Of course, that was impossible. This was only a 3rd tier, but how had he managed to enter the 10th dimension? As it turned out, a spatial overlap had appeared in this group of dimensions. It was not the kind of compression from top to bottom, but rather like the realm battlefield in the past. When one was walking in the 2nd spatial level, who knew one might pass through a cave and arrive at the 5th level or the 7th spatial level. That 3rd tier had entered a passageway in the 4th dimension, and then discovered that he had come to the 10th dimension, or at least it was the 10th level because this place had not been excavated before. Ultimately, the reason should be related to the emergence of Heavenly Venerate Chong Yen and the other 7th tiers. They were too strong, which affected the structure of this Genesis world. It was absolutely possible because this Genesis world was already dead, so it naturally couldn't withstand the power of 7th tier. When this news spread out, everyone was naturally moved. When the primitive dimension had appeared, it had greatly increased the overall strength of the Heavenly Venerable tier elites. However, limited by their strength, even 6th tier elites would not be able to set foot from the 10th dimension onwards. And now, a special passageway had actually been discovered? The camp instantly became restless. Who would still be in the mood to sit here? Not long after, a decree came from the 6th tier elites, permitting a portion of Heavenly Venerates to venture into the last era Genesis world for exploration because this would be able to increase the overall strength of Heavenly Venerable tier. However, the choice of candidates was strictly regulated. A total of over 100 people were chosen, and were able to enter into the Genesis world of the last era. Ling Han was also fortunate enough to be given a place. Additionally, supreme prodigies like Xian Chihu, Wu Haoyang, Feng Wuding, and so on were also on the list. However, Lin Yulian was excluded. She would wait for Ling Han and the others to return and take turns with them. Otherwise, if all the powerful figures left, then the Hysteria army would still be unstoppable should they launch an attack, the suppression of heaven and earth notwithstanding. It should be known that there were definitely spies of Hysteria among them, and the truth definitely couldn't be concealed. Among those who had good relations with Ling Han, only Bai Maifan was also included in this batch. The two of them immediately set out, heading towards Genesis world of the last era, which was in the void. They only had 100,000 years, and then they would have to return. Otherwise, they would be dealt with as traitors. Ling Han brought Bai Maifan and traversed through the void. He was constantly vigilant. The moment he discovered any trace of Hysteria, he would immediately return to the Genesis world. He definitely wouldn't have any thoughts of getting lucky. This time, it was only Ling Han and Bai Maifan. Because there was a strict limit on the number of people, the Empress, Hunyo, and the others had all stayed behind in the realm battlefield. They could not possibly follow him here willfully. Fortunately, Hysteria didn't appear. Although Ling Han was cautious, the two safely and smoothly arrived at the Genesis world of the last era. After learning the truth, Ling Han and Bai Maifan had different feelings when they set foot on this piece of land again. This place had once been glorious, and had once represented everything. However, because of Hysteria, it had now become ruins, and could only float in the void forever. Say, Do you think there's another Genesis world of the era before last? Bai Meifan suddenly asked. Ling Han was surprised. Your imagination is too active, isn't it? That may not be the case. Perhaps hysteria has originated from an even more ancient era, and even the Genesis world of the last era was just like us. Bai Meifan insisted on this point of view. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh in spite of himself. That's true. With how big the void is, there may be the ruins of another Genesis world. If we can find it, then wouldn't we make a fortune? Bai Meifan's eyes lit up. He was a very calm young man, but as he was talking about a Genesis world now, he was naturally excited. Yet Ling Han thought that if his body could also evolve into a Genesis world, then wouldn't he be able to have whatever he wanted? Let's go. He patted Bai Meifan's shoulder. They had to hurry up. They only had 100,000 years. 100,000 years might seem very long, but for heavenly venerates, this was a pitifully short amount of time. They arrived at the fifth dimension and searched for that passageway. This did not take too much time. The two of them were very careful because Xianxia had also come here. He would definitely not let go of Ling Han, and if he had the chance, he would definitely kill him. Ling Han had confiscated a great many great herbs from the World Alliance, but left them for the Empress and the others. This was mostly because he needed too many resources to advance another step further, and this small amount of great herbs was actually not of much use to him. Thus, it would be better to let the Empress and the others have them. Their improvement would be obvious, and they would be able to significantly increase their strength. I'll go check things out and see if there is any ambush, Bai Meifan said. Ling Han was more inclined to believe that if Xianxia had arrived here long ago, he would definitely be clinging to the treasures of the 10th dimension. He should not have wasted time waiting for him here, but it was better to be safe than sorry, so he nodded. Bai Meifan walked over, and he came back after a while and gave Ling Han a gesture, indicating that it was safe. Ling Han and Bai Meifan passed through this passageway. They obviously didn't feel any change in space, but as they walked, the path ahead suddenly became clear. They had already appeared in another place. Though there were signs that the mountains and rivers here had also been developed, they were not as exaggerated as the previous few levels, which had been completely flipped upside down. Follow me, Ling Han said. He was a grandmaster of raw stone, and who could compare to him in the exploration for veins of raw stone? Bai Meifan hurriedly followed. I say, are you also skilled in searching for veins of raw stone? Ha! Don't you know that I'm known as the mine exploration expert? Ling Han joked. I really couldn't tell, Bai Meifan said without fear. This was practically challenging his authority. Then just wait and see. Not only was Ling Han exploring for veins, but he was also looking for a new spatial passageway that could lead to a higher level dimension. Since a passage had appeared here, perhaps there would be a second, a third, several hundred, or a few thousand. However, their luck was not that good. For the moment, they had not discovered a spatial passageway, though they had discovered a considerable number of veins of ore. With Ling Han mining them precisely, they obtained great herbs every time, which made Bai Meifan exclaim in disbelief. You really are a grandmaster of raw stone? He asked in surprise. It should be known that the heavenly venerable stone could cut off divine sense, and even heavenly venerates could not use their divine sense to penetrate them. No, I am an ultimate grandmaster, Ling Han said jokingly. Bai Meifan couldn't help much in mine exploration, so he took the initiative to search for the spatial passageway. Even Ling Han did not have the ability to cheat for that, so he could only work hard and search bit by bit. Furthermore, this was the 10th dimension, which was incredibly dangerous. Occasionally, there would be energy storms that reached the 6th tier surging out of the ground. Thus, whether it was exploring for veins of or searching for spatial passageways, one had to be extremely careful, as well as possess mighty strength. Otherwise, if one was not able to react in time, heavenly venerates with battle prowess below the 6th tier would only die. In truth, even elites with battle prowess of the 6th tier would have to be extremely careful. If they were hit by the energy storm, they might not die, but they would definitely be severely injured. If they were trapped by the energy storm, they would also die. Ling Han and Bai Meifan divided the work among themselves. There were even fewer people here, so the competition was naturally even smaller. Ling Han was also a cheat-level grandmaster of raw stone. It could be imagined just how astonishing his gains were. After a few thousand years, he had gathered over 200 great herbs, and one of them was an orange-colored great herb, which could be helpful in advancing one's cultivation level. Additionally, there were also a dozen heavenly venerable seals, but only one was a 7th grade seal. The others were all 9th or 8th grade, which he had long since obtained. Great herbs aren't bad either. It can increase my cultivation level, and at this stage, this should be what I need the most. Heavenly venerable seals are only icing on the cake. Ling Han felt that he had already found enough here. It would be best if Bai Meifan returned immediately, and told him that he had found the passage to the dimensions even further underground. This had once been a Genesis world, so even if there were countless low-level dimensions that had been completely destroyed in the Great Explosion, there should still at least be around 1,000 dimensions remaining. Right now, they had only explored 10 dimensions. As for the remaining dimensions, there was an astonishingly large number of them. Ling Han left marks as he explored mines, anticipating his meetup with Bai Meifan again. However, it was destined that enemies would meet. On this day, after Ling Han had just found a large vein of or unearthed a few great herbs, he suddenly sensed an aura of life approaching him. Had Bai Meifan returned? Ling Han stopped what he was doing and turned around to look. A person appeared, bearing supreme dominance like an emperor, as if the whole world should obey him. Xianxia. Ling Han sighed upon seeing this. Why was it that whoever he didn't want to see would appear? Ha ha! Ling Han, you have delivered yourself to my doorstep. Xianxia was also startled. That was because he had not deliberately been tracking Ling Han, and had completely come here by coincidence. However, he did not hesitate in the slightest, and immediately charged over. Thoughts sped quickly through Ling Han's mind. Of course, he could tear a rip into the void and return, but if he wanted to come back here again, it would take him a lot of time. He only had a total of 100,000 years, and definitely could not waste it on making his way back here. Thus, he turned around and fled. Boom! 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 Xianxia pursued rapidly, attacking madly as he did so, wanting to kill Ling Han. Ling Han channeled all the 9th grade seals, and exploded with astonishing power for a short period of time. He also released all the dimensional projections in one go. 19 dimensions! Even Xianxia was shocked. He didn't expect that the 11 dimensions that he had seen Ling Han previously channel were far from his limit. You actually have 19 dimensions. Then, there's even more reason to kill you, he said with killing intent. Pong, pong, pong. Xianxia exploded with power, and under the crushing pressure of 6th-tier battle prowess. So what if there were 19 projections of medium-level dimensions? They could only be destroyed in an instant. However, seizing an opening in this instant, Ling Han had also won himself a sliver of a chance to escape. Heavenly Venerates were hard to kill, what more when Ling Han possessed 5th-tier battle prowess. Shoo! He fled, his figure extraordinarily fast. Coincidentally, it seemed like even the heavens were helping Ling Han. When Xianxia chased out, he actually kept encountering the surges of energy storms, so he could only turn around. After being delayed a few times like this, there was already no sign of Ling Han. Fuck! Ling Han cursed vehemently. He couldn't tolerate it any longer. He was determined to advance to the 4th tier. I'm going into seclusion. This time, I won't come out unless I reach the 4th tier. He tunneled into the ground, with the heavenly venerable stone hiding his traces. Even 6th-tier elites couldn't find him with their divine sense. They would have to dig deep into the ground to find him physically. This should be quite safe. Little Bai, I'm sorry. Ling Han took out a great herb and began to munch madly. Bai Meifan's share was here, but he planned to eat all of it. Couldn't be helped. Though Ling Han was already in the late stage of the 3rd tier, and seemed not to be far from the 4th tier, it was really too difficult for him to advance a little further. He needed a great amount of energy, so it was really a question whether these 200+ great herbs would be enough to send him to the peak stage of the 3rd tier. Forget it. Just eat them. Ling Han ate a great herb, and the innumerable powers of dimension in his body vibrated at the same time, automatically channeling. They were like a millstone that was crushing the medicinal effects into endless, extremely pure energy, which was then rapidly absorbed. Digesting a great herb actually only took him a day's time. Ling Han was speechless with shock. He was becoming more and more freakish. If it was another fifth tier that was to eat this great herb, he would not be able to digest all of it without a year's time. The energy contained within was too terrifying. Ling Han's advancement through the cultivation levels was slow, but the benefits he received were also incredibly astonishing. Just take the power of dimension for example. It could disperse and absorb the attacks of enemies. Who else could accomplish this? I'll have another. Crack. Ling Han took out another great herb and began to chew it. Then it was the third, the fourth. As the number of great herbs decreased rapidly, his cultivation level was also slowly increasing. More than half a year later, there were only 3 great herbs left, and Ling Han's cultivation level was finally close to the peak stage of the 3rd tier. There are only 3 left, and they still can't send me to the peak stage of the 3rd tier. Ling Han frowned. If it was other 5th tiers, this would be enough to deliver them from the early stage of the 5th tier to the peak stage a few times over. However, I only need 10 great herbs to solve the problem. This shouldn't be too difficult to resolve. After Ling Han consumed the remaining 3 great herbs, he went out to search for new veins of ore. However, a few thousand years had already passed, and most of the raw stone veins here had already been mined. It was already difficult to find even a single vein of ore, what more to harvest about 10 great herbs. Ling Han's frown became deeper and deeper, yet he still roamed around in the surroundings. Even if he couldn't find veins of ore, just let him find a spatial passageway to enter a dimension further below. That way, it would definitely be no problem for him to obtain another 10 great herbs. As he was thinking, he suddenly discovered an aura crashing towards him from ahead. Heavenly Venerates would release their auras, but they would limit it within a specific range. The area within this range was equivalent to the Heavenly Venerates' absolute territory. Furthermore, in this dangerous place, this territory was naturally even more important as various bits of information could be fed back to the Heavenly Venerate in the nick of time so they could avoid danger in advance. Ling Han naturally had also released his own aura. He had crashed into the other's aura, and the other person had also crashed into his. Both of them were shocked, and then discovered that the other party was extremely strong, not inferior to themselves at all. Then, in the next instant, they saw each other. Feng Wuding. How coincidental. Was this the so-called "it was destined that enemies would meet"? Ling Han let out a battle cry and laughed. Without another word, he immediately rushed up and began fighting. Ling Han. Feng Wuding only had time to roar in fury before he had no choice but to counterattack. He knew how powerful Ling Han was, and there was no third person here. Even if he was killed, no one would be able to find out that it was Ling Han. He counterattacked with all his might, directly channeling his full power. He was the son of destiny of the Genesis world from the last generation, and would become the only sovereign in the world in future. It was extremely possible that he would surpass the 7th tier, so how could he die here? Pong! 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 However, what greeted him was Ling Han's iron fist. He was boosted by 8th grade seals, and though only half was used, they could increase his power by as many as 500 times. This was something that Feng Wuding could not match, no matter what secret technique he used. Feng Wuding was beaten up, and he was extremely depressed. Just think, he was the son of destiny of the Genesis world from the last generation, but why had he encountered Ling Han? The latter had shattered all of his confidence to bits. Ling Han's eyes were cold. He did not care what kind of prodigy Feng Wuding was. Feng Wuding was in the World Alliance, and the World Alliance had severely wounded his daughter and son-in-law. This debt had to be paid back in double. He had no enmity with Feng Wuding, but who asked Feng Wuding to join the World Alliance? But just as Ling Han was about to deliver a fatal strike, he sensed another aura, which was incredibly powerful. The third person soon appeared. It was Wu Haoyang. A thought immediately flashed through Ling Han's mind. Should he kill him or not? If he killed him, then unless he killed Wu Haoyang to keep him quiet, Heavenly Venerate Chong Yen and the other 7th-tier elites would probably abandon everything else and ignore hysteria to seek Ling Han out for an accounting when they found out. By then, it would probably be very difficult to save him even with Lin Luo interfering. The problem was that, firstly, Ling Han could not kill Wu Haoyang to keep him quiet, and secondly, there was no reason for him to kill an innocent person either. Forget it. He immediately made his decision, but it was one thing not to kill him. He still threw a punch, beating Feng Wuding to the point that he lost all ability to resist. Then, he searched out the spatial tool that he possessed. With a sweep of his divine sense, Ling Han couldn't help but look pleased. There were actually 14 great herbs inside, and they were all yellow-colored great herbs. Thanks. Ling Han laughed loudly, and casually tossed Feng Wuding onto the ground. Then, he nodded at Wu Haoyang, turned, and left. Wu Haoyang did not stop him. This was not the realm battlefield, so how could there be so many rules? As long as Ling Han did not kill anyone, it would be fine. Feng Wuding was so furious that he was about to vomit blood. These over a dozen great herbs were the total gains of the World Alliance over these years. They were all given to him so that he could quickly rise up and advance to the 4th tier, thereafter suppressing Ling Han. But now, all these great herbs had actually benefited his rival. How could Feng Wuding not be fuming with anger? Ah! He roared in fury. It would be best to keep this kind of wealth-delivering boy alive. Ling Han nodded. Killing Feng Wuding would not be enough to vent his hatred. His target was Yu Borong. Then let's decide on this happily. Ling Han found another safe place, and began to consume great herbs. 10 days passed, and he had also digested 10 great herbs, but he was still a sliver away from the peak stage of the 3rd tier. Fortunately, the wealth-sending boy is generous enough. There are still 4 great herbs left. Ling Han mumbled to himself, and began chewing on great herbs again. 1 wasn't enough, and 2 were also a bit lacking. It was only right when he devoured the 3rd great herb that Ling Han finally reached the peak stage of the 3rd tier. I should spend some time tempering my foundations. However, there are endless powers of dimension in my body, which is equivalent to a millstone that has already tempered my power to an incredibly pure level. Moreover, I don't have any more time. I will immediately begin breaking through to the 4th tier. Ling Han channeled all the heavenly venerable seals. In the first place, this was a means to communicate with fundamental particles. With more than 200 seals channeling at the same time, his spirit expanded endlessly to sense the 3rd fundamental power of the heaven and earth. Previously, he had spent several 100 million years to achieve this, but now he could not afford that much time. I have to sense the 3rd fundamental particle as quickly as possible. Ling Han took out that orange-colored great herb, thought for a while, and then immediately began to chew on it. He believed that he would be able to break through to the 4th tier without relying on this kind of great herb, but this could possibly take 1 to 2 billion years. He did not have that much time to waste now. Weren't great herbs saved up for the purpose of consumption? In just a few bites, this great herb had completely entered Ling Han's stomach. Not long after, a great many particles appeared in his mind, as many as the stars in the sky. Although there were countless of them, they could still be categorized. There were a total of 6 types, and the 2 types of power in Ling Han's body immediately resonated with 2 types of starlight particles, causing the light emitted by these particles to become even more dazzling. These were the fundamental particles, Ling Han thought. No wonder the orange-colored great herb could help heavenly venerates advance their cultivation level. This was equivalent to materializing the fundamental particles. How could Ling Han possibly dare to waste time? He hurriedly went to sense those fundamental particles that he had yet to master. However, the moment his divine sense touched them, those starlight particles immediately dimmed and rapidly disappeared. Ling Han tensed. Even if he had ingested a great herb, it did not mean that he would definitely be able to break through. Could only offer him some help. He calmed down and no longer touched them blindly. Instead, he only targeted one particular type. The fundamental particles repelled each other. If he was greedy and wanted to master all the fundamental particles in one go, the result would only be that he would not be able to get anything. He targeted a single type of particle and continued to touch it increasing his sensitivity to this kind of particle. The effects of the great herb were very short-term, and after merely half a day, his mind dimmed, and he could no longer sense the slightest bit of it. Ling Han did not feel the slightest bit of regret. He once again released his divine sense, which enshrouded his surroundings. The mark of the third fundamental particle had already been left in his mind. Now, he only had to communicate with the actual fundamental particle through this mark. Time slowly crept by. 10 days, 100 days, over 7,000 years later, Ling Han's divine sense suddenly trembled. Joy instantly spread across his face. He had finally communicated with the third fundamental particle. Come! Over 200 heavenly venerable seals lit up at the same time, continuously absorbing such particles into his body, increasing Ling Han's power. This was the mesotron particle. Ling Han suppressed the need for energy in the powers of dimension in his body, and focused on extracting these particles to increase his power, temper his physique, and stabilize his cultivation level. Everything else could be done slowly. He could not rush things. 100,000 years was too short. In the void, 3 figures were presently rapidly flying past. Upon a closer look, each of them was strange-looking. They were either multi-armed, multi-legged, multi-headed, or multi-eyed. These were Hysteria's creations. These 3 monsters all exuded a violent aura. They were incredibly strong, but their eyes were filled with the brilliance of intelligence. They were definitely not something that those monsters that only knew slaughter could compare to. They arrived at the Genesis world of the last era. They descended, and as their eyes swept over the surroundings, a change took place in their bodies. They became human, and their aura similarly changed. They became no different from normal humans. They walked slowly, searching for clues. These were 3 sixth-tier monsters, and their mission was very simple, and that was to kill 2 people. One of them was Ling Han, while the other was Feng Wuding. After spending another 30,000 years, Ling Han had finally stabilized his cultivation as a 4th tier. I still have a lot of room for improvement, he said to himself. The maximum number of dimensions that he could develop in his body had suddenly increased to as many as 137. Furthermore, the upper limit in quality of these dimensions was also close to a high-level dimension now. Additionally, the powers of dimension could also be improved now. However, the time needed for this would be much, much too long. Even if he was given 1 billion years, that would probably be just barely enough time. Right now, he couldn't care less. His priority was mine exploration and unearthing raw stones. After his cultivation level had increased, Ling Han's luck suddenly seemed to have improved. Not many days later, he discovered a spatial passageway. He was already fearless now. Even if he encountered Xianxia again, he was confident that he could put up a fight now. After entering the passageway, space overlapped and changed. After half a day, Ling Han finally entered the ruins of another dimension. He was definitely not the first person to come here, but this was not one of the first 10 dimensions because the traces of veins of or being mined were still very new. Boom! An energy storm surged out violently 30 meters in front of Ling Han. Ling Han's heroic spirit soared, and he threw a punch at the energy storm. Pong! The power of the punch surged, and a hole was actually punched open in the energy storm. This hole did not close up even after a long time had passed. Only after the force of Ling Han's punch completely dissipated did the hole in the energy storm begin to close, and rapidly disappeared. My battle prowess should barely be on the level of the 6th tier. Ling Han had gained a more direct understanding. I can only be ranked among the weakest 6th tiers. Couldn't be helped. He hadn't cultivated to the pinnacle of this cultivation level, so he could only be regarded as a weak 6th tier with battle prowess like this. However, no matter how weak he was still a 6th tier elite. He was still overwhelmingly impressive. If I advance another step further, I will be able to possess the battle prowess of a 7th tier elite. Ling Han's eyes lit up. If he reached the 7th tier, he would no longer need to worry about the energy storm here or the super flames formed by the fundamental particles, and could mine the treasures from the Genesis world of the last era completely. At that time, his cultivation level would definitely soar, allowing him to charge into the 7th tier even in terms of cultivation level. Then, his battle prowess would reach an unimaginable level of strength. I wonder where that by Myfin went? Ling Han mumbled to himself. Forget it, I'll just harvest some great herbs first and give that brat a portion as compensation. He began to explore the mines. Though he had come here very late with his incomparable ability of exploration and mining, he had already harvested another 20-odd great herbs and 3 heavenly venerable seals in a mere century. He had just found a new vein of ore, and had not yet begun to explore it, but then he looked like he was listening attentively. There was the sound of battle. Fighting here was naturally a very normal thing. At first, Ling Han did not take it to heart, but as the shock waves from the battle became more and more intense, he managed to sense a familiar aura. By Myfin, he was fighting with someone? Ling Han immediately dashed toward the location of the battle. His lackey was in trouble, so how could he stand by and watch as the boss? It was only a matter of a few steps, and he was already close to the area where the battle was taking place. He saw that Bai Myfin was indeed fighting fiercely with someone, and his opponent was shockingly Feng Wuding. Ling Han really felt like complaining. Why was it Feng Wuding again? Was he really going to become his wealth-delivering boy? Bai, I'll ask you for the last time, where is Ling Han? Feng Wuding shouted loudly. His voice was extremely harsh and filled with oppressiveness. He was completely suppressing Bai Myfin, showing strength that surpassed the latter by not only just a little bit, because he had already advanced to the 4th tier. Feng Wuding, as a 4th tier, had abilities that had directly soared to the peak stage of the 5th tier, and he was presently only in the early stage of the 4th tier. He was sure that by the time he reached the middle stage of the 4th tier, or at most the late stage, his battle prowess would be able to leap into the 6th tier. The Son of Destiny was indeed extraordinary. Although Bai Myfin was incredibly freakish, compared with Feng Wuding, he was not just a little bit weaker. His battle prowess was also close to peak stage 5th tier, but while they were both at the peak stage of the 5th tier, there was still a difference. Moreover, when it came to heavenly venerable seals, there was also a huge gap between the two of them. Thus, Bai Myfin was at a complete disadvantage, vomiting blood continuously from the barrage. Haha! I don't know Ling Han like the back of my hand, so how would I know? Though Bai Myfin was outmatched, his expression was still very carefree. He was completely unconcerned, and fought with all his might. Would Feng Wuding dare to kill him? Just like how no one dared to kill Feng Wuding, no one dared to kill Bai Myfin either, unless they could destroy him so completely that no secrets would be leaked at all. Who in this world would be able to escape the pursuit of a vengeful 7th tier elite? However, though Feng Wuding didn't dare to kill Bai Myfin, he was completely capable of severely wounding and ruthlessly humiliating him. This was a grudge between juniors, what more when it was a battle of equal cultivation levels, so even if Bai Fan found out, how could he bring himself to seek out Feng Wuding? Even if he disregarded his pride, how could Heavenly Venerate Chong Yen and the others be easily trifled with? Bai Myfin used all his powerful moves, yet he was outmatched. He could only fight and flee at the same time. What do you mean by the greatest prodigy of all eternity? You're nothing but trash. Feng Wuding smirked coldly. He had suffered greatly at Ling Han's hands, but within the same cultivation level, only Ling Han could suppress him. Faced with any other prodigy, he was completely at the upper hand. Don't forget, you were almost pummeled into idiocy by my brother. Bai Myfin mocked. Feng Wuding's expression immediately turned dark. The greatest humiliation he had endured in this life came from Ling Han. Ling Han shook his head. In the past, Bai Myfin was such a nice person, filled with sunshine, but now, he had actually learned to speak toxic words. Who knew who it was that had led him astray? If the Empress and the others were present, they would definitely point at his nose and say, "It's you, it's you." Bai Myfin was fleeing, but Feng Wuding wasn't the only one here. There were also 2 other 5th tier elites from the World Alliance, and they both moved to block him. These 2 5th tiers were not stronger than Bai Myfin, but they didn't need to defeat him. They only needed to block him for a while so that Feng Wuding would catch up to him. Humph! If Ling Han dares to appear again, I will definitely teach him a lesson, Feng Wuding said coldly. He was now a 4th tier, and his ability could not be compared to when he was a 3rd tier. He would definitely sweep aside all others who had 5th tier battle prowess. Oh, how do you plan to teach me? Ling Han said with a smile. With a step, he had already appeared beside Bai Meifan. When they saw Ling Han, the 2 5th tiers from the World Alliance couldn't help but feel shocked. They actually didn't dare to make a move. Their psychological trauma was too great. Previously, Ling Han had single-handedly wiped the floor with all 9 great 5th tier elites of the World Alliance. Now, there were only 2 of them, so how were they supposed to stop Ling Han? Ling Han! Bai Meifan was startled. He had not thought that Ling Han would actually appear at such a crucial time. Ling Han, Feng Wuding said through gritted teeth. He was filled with hatred. Ling Han was unconcerned. We haven't seen each other for such a long time, and you have already advanced to the 4th tier. Looks like you have obtained quite a number of great herbs. Even if Feng Wuding's cultivation speed was astonishing, it was still impossible for him to advance to the 4th tier in just a few thousand years. He had to have obtained a considerable number of great herbs. At the mention of great herbs, Feng Wuding's expression darkened even further. He had already been robbed twice by Ling Han, and was presently filled with anger. Ling Han, today, I will show you what the Son of Destiny means. He roared in fury, and charged over. Ling Han casually threw out a punch, appearing to be at ease. You have advanced into 4th tier, so how could it be that I have not? The slower his progress was, the more explosive his burst of power would be when he actually broke through. Pong! It was only a single punch, and Feng Wuding was sent flying, throwing up blood continuously. 6th tier battle prowess. Feng Wuding's face was as white as a sheet. He had 5th tier battle prowess, but even if he was at the peak stage of the 5th tier, so what? Faced with 6th tier battle prowess, he would only be bleeding and battered. His expression was filled with disbelief as his pride had suffered a lot of damage. Wasn't that so? He thought of himself as extraordinary. He was the Son of Destiny. However, he was also in the early stage of the 4th tier, and his battle prowess was only at the peak stage of the 5th tier. Though he could defeat all those with 5th tier battle prowess, he was still very far from reaching the 6th tier. However, Ling Han had reached the 6th tier in terms of actual battle prowess. With such a comparison, wasn't the gap between the 2 of them clear at a single glance? However, Feng Wuding couldn't accept this. It was one thing for him to be suppressed by Ling Han when he had been in the 3rd tier, but now he was already in the 4th tier. The higher the cultivation level, the greater his advantage as the Son of Destiny should be. On the contrary, Ling Han had now left him far behind. Could it be that his title as the Son of Destiny was just an empty label? Feng Wuding's pride couldn't accept such a result, but no matter how freakish he was, no matter how he used powerful moves, 5th tier battle prowess couldn't possibly reach the 6th tier. The gap was as wide as the sky, just like how Ling Han was strong enough, right? But when he was in 3rd tier, he could not advance his battle prowess to the 6th tier no matter how hard he tried. Feng Wuding could only be thrashed, and he was very soon battered and bloody, looking just like Bai Meifan. Good fight! Bai Meifan clapped, and at the same time he was also filled with shock. Ling Han's battle prowess was already at the 6th tier, and he was only one step away from reaching the 7th tier. At that time, he would really be standing at the apex, and would no longer be subject to any restrictions. Ling Han only thrashed Feng Wuding, and did not intend to kill him. Though there was great enmity between him and the World Alliance, Feng Wuding himself actually had not done any evil. It was just very coincidental and very unlucky that he had joined the World Alliance. Moreover, Feng Wuding was his wealth-delivering boy. This guy had received priority nurturing from the World Alliance, and had a lot of treasures on him. Ling Han should be shearing him in waves like wool, but he could not bear to kill him. Just as he was fighting to his heart's content, Ling Han suddenly felt 3 terrifying auras sweep towards him. 6th tier, 6th tier, 6th tier. As he was startled, the 3 auras had already approached, and 3 people appeared. He didn't recognize any of them, and they were all extremely unfamiliar to him. There were a total of around 106 tier elites in the Genesis world, and Ling Han had seen over half of them before. Thus, it was normal that he didn't recognize the three people in front of him. However, these three sixth-tier heavenly venerates gave him a strange feeling. However, he couldn't put his finger on what was off for the moment. The eyes of these three sixth-tier elites swept over them and immediately locked onto Ling Han. To be more accurate, their eyes had locked onto Ling Han and Feng Wuding. Two fifth-tiers of the World Alliance hurriedly asked for help from these three sixth-tiers. Seniors, please lend a hand to save Feng Wuding. He is the one that the seventh-tiers, Pu Piu. However, before the two fifth-tiers could finish speaking, one of the sixth-tiers had already moved. With a single strike, the two of them were vomiting blood, severely wounded. And this was still because they were at the fifth tier. If they were at the fourth tier, they would definitely be killed with a single strike. Ling Han, Bai Meifan, and Feng Wuding were all shocked. What did these three people mean by their actions? Seniors. The two fifth tiers coughed up blood. Their eyes filled with confusion. Why had they suddenly suffered such an attack? Ling Han's heart shuddered, and realization suddenly dawned on him. He said to Bai Meifan, "Leave first." Bai Meifan looked towards him, his expression filled with confusion. He was the descendant of a seventh tier. Although the three people on the other side were sixth tiers, did they dare to make a move on him? It should be known that he had the means left behind by a seventh tier. Once he died, Bai Fan would immediately know everything. The higher the cultivation level, the clearer one would be about how terrifying a seventh tier was. Even these three people wouldn't dare to do such a thing. Idiot! They are Hysteria's subordinates, Ling Han shouted. He finally discovered what was off about these three people. That was because they were the creations of Hysteria, so there was an incredibly strange component in their auras. What? Only now did Bai Meifan get a great shock. If these three people were Hysteria's creations, then he wouldn't have to worry about them not attacking him at all. In any case, they were already mortal enemies. To say nothing of killing a descendant of a seventh tier, even if they killed the descendants of all the seventh tiers, so what? What about you? He asked Ling Han. I will fight them. Ling Han was filled with fighting spirit. All right. Bai Meifan made the decision, turned, and ran. He ran, but the three sixth tiers did not give chase. They merely stared at Ling Han and Feng Wuding, and their aura gradually changed. What was originally only a bit of a cold aura completely spread out now, exuding endless evil. At the same time, their forms also changed. One sprouted a few more arms, another grew out more legs, and the last had 7 heads. Hysteria's creations had many unique traits. The difference was that their eyes were exuding the luster of intelligence. This was understandable. If they hadn't possessed such intelligence, they wouldn't have been able to find this place at all. They would have long since been lost in the void. After such a long time, Hysteria finally made its move. Ling Han was filled with lofty aspirations. He had just advanced to the 4th tier and wanted to test out his own battle prowess. With a shake of Ling Han's right hand, Feng Wuding was knocked unconscious so that this guy would not cause trouble for him in battle. Ling Han smiled faintly. Are you here to kill me? Or him? Feng Wuding was the person who had been chosen by the Genesis world of the last era. Perhaps Hysteria would also feel wary. Who knew what secrets this guy was hiding in his body? It was possible that they would only be unleashed when he reached the 5th tier, 6th tier, or even the 7th tier, eventually posing a threat to Hysteria. You both have to die. A 6th tier monster spoke up, its voice dry, as if it had just learned to speak. Ling Han pondered for a moment before shaking his head and saying, Normally, I wouldn't care at all whether this person lives or dies. However, if Hysteria wants to kill him, I want to save him. He shrunk Feng Wuding's body with his powerful abilities, transforming it into a tiny that he casually stored away. Come on then. Ling Han crooked a finger at the 3 6th tier monsters. The 3 monsters immediately charged over. Boom! Frightening battle prowess surged, rumbling out towards Ling Han. They were very strong, all of them peak stage 6th tiers. He was sure that Hysteria had to have paid a great price to create these 3 monsters. This attack was at peak stage 6th tier, so it was obvious that they wanted to succeed with the first strike. Ling Han shook his head. If he had encountered these 3 monsters when he had still been at the 3rd tier, he would definitely have been outmatched. He could only have immediately torn a rip into the void and returned afterwards. Otherwise, staying for an extra instant could have possibly spelled death for him. As for now, he was confident that he could put up a fight. Boom! He channeled all the 8th grade seals, and his battle prowess instantly soared madly. He let out a battle cry and brandished fists of fury to meet the incoming attack. Pong! Ling Han exchanged a blow with the 3 monsters, and his body suddenly shook. He felt blood rush upwards in his body, which made him feel very terrible. However, the 3 6th-tier monsters also trembled and retreated continuously. In a battle of 1 against 3, Ling Han still enjoyed the upper hand. This was natural because these 3 monsters had not channeled heavenly venerable seals, and Ling Han had directly closed the gap of 1,000 times between the power of both sides. He would not lose even if it was 1 against 3. However, the 3 monsters immediately made a comeback. A heavenly venerable seal lit up on each of them, instantly increasing their battle prowess by more than 70 times. 2nd grade seals. Thankfully, every monster only channeled a 2nd grade seal. If they were also using combination seals, then Ling Han would really be having a headache. He would not be qualified to resist at all. Boom! They exchanged blows again. This time it was Ling Han's turn to be outmatched. The 3 great 6th tiers had boosted themselves with 2nd grade seals, and their battle prowess had increased explosively by more than 70 times. They had once again gained the upper hand in terms of power, and it was a crushing advantage at that. Ling Han let out a battle cry, and the 19-dimensional projections were unleashed together, suppressing the 3 6th tiers. However, it was utterly useless. The 6th tier was too strong, and the dimensions inside Ling Han's body hadn't caught up to his cultivation level yet. They were only medium-level dimensions, so how could they suppress a 6th tier? Pong! Merely being shaken by the aura of 6th tier, these dimensional projections were all turned into pieces. Ling Han sighed internally. If he had let out a real dimension, it could still just barely withstand a few blows. However, if it was a dimensional projection, the gap would be too great and would have no effect at all. As he fought, he continued to retreat. This was a battle of 1 against 3, and they were all peak stage 6 tiers at that. It would be strange if he really won. The 3 6th tiers pursued him closely. They only had one thought in mind, and that was to kill. No matter where Ling Han fled, they would persist and not give up. No matter who stood in their way, they would kill them without mercy. Ling Han was very calm. At present, he also had 6th-tier battle prowess. If he wanted to kill someone at the same cultivation level as him, it would be as difficult as ascending the heavens. He had no intention to fight to the death without retreating. However, a peak stage 6th tier was indeed powerful. No matter how Ling Han switched directions, they would always be able to firmly cling onto him. No matter what he tried, Ling Han would not be able to shake them off. Time flew by as one side fled and the other side pursued. Before long, 300 years had already passed. Ling Han continued to use the energy storms here to delay them, and even caused these 3 6th tiers to suffer a little. However, they ignored it completely and continued to pursue him closely. Dregs of hysteria. Take this! A loud battle cry rang out, and 2 figures charged over at the same time. Xianxia and Wu Haoyang. It was clear that the 2 greatest prodigies of all eternity had obtained great fortune here. Their cultivation level had already reached the peak stage of the 5th tier. However, this was the real difficulty. Just think, they had all been stuck at the 4th tier for an epoch before finally advancing to the 5th tier. It could be imagined that without a crimson great herb, they might have to take 2, 3, or even more epochs to advance to the 6th tier. However, with the cultivation level of peak stage 5th tier, added with their freakishness, the strength of their battle prowess was definitely terrifying. They charged over from the sidelines, and just happened to intercept those 3 6th-tier monsters. The 2 sides immediately came to blows, and the battle was incredibly intense. Xianxia and Wu Haoyang appeared in time, and intercepted the 3 6th-tier monsters. Ling Han was surprised. Xianxia would actually move to help him? This guy was intent on killing Ling Han, and it was already very kind of him not to take advantage of the opportunity to hit him when he was down, but to actually help. Has the sun risen from the west? But Xianxia had indeed joined forces with Wu Haoyang, and was battling extremely intensely with the three great sixth-tier monsters. That was definitely not an act. Ling Han could only say that in terms of the big picture, prodigies were impeccable, just like Xiao Yingxiong of the world's paramount martial academy. Faced with the surviving dregs of Hysteria's troops, he unhesitatingly left the hope of survival to Ling Han. Now that they were facing a great enemy, Xianxia did not think too much about it, and directly charged forward. However, though Xianxia and Wu Haoyang were the greatest prodigies of all eternity, they were only at the peak stage of the fifth tier, after all. Their battle prowess was close to the peak stage of the sixth tier, and they were actually no match for those three monsters in terms of power. Thankfully, they all possessed first-grade seals, and Xianxia, for example, possessed a set of first-grade combination seals. Once they were channeled, his battle prowess would completely crush his opponent. If this were the realm battlefield, then with Xianxia showing his might, his opponent would definitely be killed. However, these three monsters had intelligence. They clearly knew that Xianxia's power was already overwhelming, so how could they possibly face him head-on? They separated, choosing not to exchange blows with Xianxia. In just 2 hours, Xianxia's boosted power would be reduced to its original state. Xianxia naturally would not waste his own power for nothing. Since the enemy did not fight him head-on, he immediately stopped channeling the first-grade combination seals, and the battle instantly fell into a stalemate. Ling Han let out a battle cry and charged back. He, too, had sixth-tier battle prowess after all, so he couldn't just sit by and watch. The three great prodigies teamed up against three peak-stage sixth-tier monsters. No matter how much Xianxia restrained himself from using the first-grade combination seals, once he used them, he would lose one more chance to use them. After battling for 3 days, the energy release of his set of first-grade combination seals had been completely depleted. Instantly, the three monsters no longer had any reservations and began a mad barrage of attacks. Xianxia and Wu Haoyang had each mastered a first-grade seal. This would surpass the second-grade seals that the three monsters used, but their original power was insufficient, and those could only compensate for the power gap between the two sides, and could not give them a crushing advantage. The problem was that there were three monsters, and Ling Han was the weak link. His 8th-grade combination seals had already finished releasing energy, and though the 9th-grade combination seals could also increase his power by more than 200 times, it was still unable to close the gap in power between the two sides. The three great prodigies fell into a dilemma, but since they could become the greatest prodigies of all eternity, which of them did not have a tenacious will? So what if they were at a disadvantage, or even in a difficult situation? As long as there was a sliver of a chance, they would fight to the end. The three of them joined forces. It was clear that there had been no previous cooperation, but in practically the blink of an eye, they had formed a tacit understanding. They cooperated with each other, producing an effect of 1 + 1 that was greater than 3. On the other hand, the three sixth-tier monsters didn't have such excellent coordination. They all attacked on their own, their attacks random. It looked like though Hysteria had bestowed intelligence on them, it had to have held something back. Otherwise, they were already sixth tiers, so how could they not know how to cooperate at all? And it was precisely this that allowed the three great prodigies to hold up in the battle. After battling for more than half a month, all their heavenly venerable seals had been used up. They were clearly at an absolute disadvantage, yet defended extremely tenaciously. In fact, it could even be said that they were indomitable. By the looks of it, they could still continue battling. Another month, or even 1 or 2 years wouldn't be a problem. Ha ha ha! The three great prodigies all laughed loudly. Though their bodies were covered with injuries, their fighting spirit was still incredibly high. After battling for another 3 months, other elites finally arrived. These were 2 sixth-tier elites from the Flaming Frost Realm. Evil creatures, die! The 2 great heavenly venerates immediately charged over. They weren't peak stage 6 tiers, but they still had 6-tier battle prowess, and they were also a fresh force. Instantly, the disadvantage of Ling Han's side was reversed, but it was only a slight reversal. To say nothing of gaining an advantage, it couldn't even be considered a draw. However, another few days later, a second wave of 6th-tier elites arrived. In this manner, the two sides finally fought to a tie. The three Hysteria's creations communicated with their divine sense. "Let's go!" They reached a consensus and immediately retreated. Xianxia and the others did not pursue. Firstly, they could not catch up, and secondly, so what if they did? Would they be able to win? The surviving dregs of Hysteria's troops actually dare to chase us all the way here. What audacity! A 6th-tier elite said. He was a little curious, but also a little angry. These Hysteria's creations didn't take them seriously at all? "All of you be careful. We will go and contact the other 6th tiers, and besiege these three evil creatures together," another 6th tier said. The 6th tier elites all left, and very soon only Ling Han, Xianxia, and Wu Haoyang were left. "It is truly fun to fight side by side with the two of you," Wu Haoyang laughed loudly. Ling Han also smiled. He glanced at Xianxia. After they had fought side by side, he had a more positive view of this guy now. Humph! Yet Xianxia's expression was cold. He met Ling Han's gaze. "Don't think that I will let you go just because you have fought side by side with me. Fuck." Ling Han peered at this guy. He had just changed his opinion slightly, but the latter had immediately revealed his true colors. "Same to you," Ling Han said in reply. "Remember to clean your neck as well. Sooner or later, I'll chop off your head. Then I'll kill you now," Xianxia said balefully. "Initially, on the basis of the battle just now, I wanted to spare you, but you insist on seeking death. Come on then." Ling Han crooked a finger, not afraid in the slightest. As a 6th tier as well, even if he was outmatched, it did not mean that he could not put up a fight. "I'll oblige you." Xianxia was just about to attack, yet he was stopped by Wu Haoyang. With him there really wouldn't be a fight. All right, listen to me. Ling Han, you head west. Xianxia, you go east." He became the mediator, which also caused his expression to become very strange. Someone like him only had battle in his eyes, and now he was actually stopping others from starting a battle, which was a little awkward. Humph! Ling Han and Xianxia exchanged a glance before turning around to leave. One headed east, while the other headed west. It was as if they were determined to never see each other again. "That's right." Ling Han clapped his hands and threw out Feng Wuding. After making him return to his original form, he first snatched away the spatial tool that Feng Wuding had on him, and then tossed him over to Wu Haoyang. As Wu Haoyang and Xianxia watched, the corners of their mouths twitched slightly. Ling Han robbed Feng Wuding right in front of their eyes, and this was not the first time, either. "You keep bullying the same guy. Is that really good?" Feng Wuding was also slowly waking up, and just happened to witness this scene. He couldn't help but throw up blood in fury. That was the accumulation of the World Alliance over innumerable years, and it had once again benefited Ling Han. "Ling Han, you just wait. I will definitely kill you," he shouted loudly, his face filled with despondence. Since the heavens already gave birth to him, Feng Wuding, why did the heavens give birth to Ling Han? Ling Han! Before Ling Han had left too long, he saw Bai Meifan running towards him. "It's good that you're fine." He patted his chest. "How was it? Did Xianxia save you?" Ling Han was surprised. "You asked Xianxia for help?" "I first encountered Xianxia and told him about the situation. Could it be that he didn't go and save you?" Bai Meifan was startled. Ling Han shook his head. "He came, and so did Wu Haoyang." "That's good." Bai Meifan nodded. Ling Han was really quite surprised. He had not expected that Xianxia would actually step out to save him, which taught him a good lesson. In a different situation, if Xianxia was the one being hunted down by Hysteria's army, would he help? Ling Han pondered for a moment before nodding slowly. No matter how great the conflict between him and Xianxia was, it was still an internal problem. No matter who won or lost, it would not have any adverse effects on the Flaming Frost Realm. However, no matter what the Hysteria army did, as long as they succeeded, they would definitely hurt the flaming frost realm. Internal strife was one matter, but there had to be a bottom line. Alright, Ling Han would accept this favor. If Xianxia were to fall into a siege of Hysteria's army in the future, he would save him. Come, let's continue digging for stones. The two of them walked around, looking for veins of or in digging raw stones, and their yield was very bountiful. 100,000 years passed quickly, and it was time for the two of them to return. They set out on the path of return, and after asking around, they found out that the 3/6 tiers of Hysteria troops had not been discovered all this while. Who knew what corner they had hidden themselves in? These creatures had not been killed, and would still be a hidden danger. Who knew where they would suddenly appear from and deliver a fatal strike? They traveled through the void, and only a dozen over years later, the two of them returned to the realm battlefield. Next, they would be switching with a different batch of people who would be going off to explore the Genesis world of the last era. The Rain Emperor and Ji Wuming were both in this batch, but the Empress and Hunyo would have to wait. Lin Yulian had also left, which also meant that there was no one here to protect Ling Han. Xianxia could do as he liked. However, it was useless even if Lin Yulian did not leave. Xianxia had obtained great benefits in the Genesis world of the last era, and his strength had directly soared to peak stage 6th tier, already surpassing hers. True enough, without anyone holding him back, Xianxia gave Ling Han a lot of difficult problems, sending him to Hysteria's base to continue the decapitation mission. Ling Han, on the other hand, was unconcerned. His battle prowess had already soared to the 6th tier. In this place where cultivation level was suppressed, he was completely capable of charging in and out of Hysteria's army. Of course, he could not withstand the combined attacks of tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of 5th tiers either. Aside from the undying and indestructible 7th tier, even a 6th tier would be crushed into dust. Right now, Ling Han no longer had to worry about encountering Hysteria in the void either. With 6th tier battle prowess, even Hysteria's doppelganger wouldn't be able to kill him. At most, Hysteria's doppelganger would only be able to wound him slightly. Since that was the case, Ling Han also gladly obeyed the command and dived into Hysteria's base for a round of killing. Killing these monsters couldn't provide life essence, but the power of dimension in Ling Han's body was like a millstone. While dispersing these attacks, it could also transform a portion of the attacking power into his nutrition. It should be known that the hardest thing about improving Ling Han's cultivation level was the growth of these infinite powers of dimension inside his body. Now, these dimension seeds could absorb their own nutrients. This naturally made Ling Han happy. He distributed the great herbs and heavenly venerable seals that he had obtained from the Genesis world of the last era among the Empress and the others. Of course, there was also a share for Bai Myphin. Before this area became completely neutral, Hysteria's army obviously wouldn't attack. This was also a rare opportunity for them to improve their strength. Aside from battling, Ling Han also continued to cultivate in seclusion. Although there were fewer and fewer heavenly venerable seals that he could obtain from the Genesis world of the last era, it still allowed the number of seals he had mastered to reach as many as 300. When he channeled them together, his cultivation speed increased by close to 2,000 times. There was no need to concern himself with the power of dimension in his body, so Ling Han's cultivation progress naturally increased. He had hopes of reaching the peak stage of the 4th tier in 200 million to 300 million years. Meanwhile, the seeds that had already evolved into dimensions in his body were also rapidly growing. 100,000 years later, the second batch of people returned, and the third batch set out. The Empress and Hunyo were both included in this batch. Ling Han reminded the two women to be careful, while he continued to battle at Hysteria's base to improve his power of dimension. Merely after 700,000 years, the dimensions inside Ling Han's body had completely caught up with his cultivation level. He was still in the early stage of the 4th tier. If there had been a gap of 100 steps between the early stage of the 4th tier and the middle stage, he would have taken about 2 steps by now. However, even though he had only just achieved minimal progress, it increased the upper limit of the number of dimensions he could accommodate to as many as 200. By now, these dimensions had all reached medium level and were close to high level. If they were released all at once, even only as projections, they would be extremely shocking. The Empress and Hunyo had long since returned, and after 1,000,000 years, it was finally Ling Han's turn to go to the Genesis world of the last era again. But before they could set out, they had no choice but to postpone their plans. That was because Hysteria's army had finally launched an attack. A boundless army charged over, and those densely packed numbers caused one's scalp to go numb with terror. Yet Ling Han was not concerned at all. He took the initiative to charge out and released 20-dimensional projections in a single stroke. Now, these dimensions were all close to high level, and even fifth tiers would be affected slightly, while fourth tiers would be directly smashed to the ground. Ling Han shot out a punch, and over 1,000 Hysteria troops were instantly crushed and killed. Seeing that he was so violent and powerful, everyone was stunned. But they were also filled with excitement. With a genius like Ling Han standing guard, what was Hysteria's army worth? It was not just Ling Han. Xianxia, Wu Haoyang, and Lin Yolian also displayed world-shaking strength. Though Feng Wuding had been repeatedly robbed by Ling Han, making him look weak, he was in truth a prodigy that was only inferior to Ling Han. The advancement of his cultivation level was frightening, as he had already reached the middle stage of the fourth tier. Although his battle prowess had yet to reach the sixth tier, he could already sweep aside all other fifth-tier elites. It had to be admitted that the Genesis world of the last era had really helped them greatly. In this battle, though the Flaming Frost Realm did not have the advantage of the dimensional suppression, Ling Han, Xianxia, and the other prodigies were too awesome. Their presence had the effect of stabilizing the situation, and they actually managed to defend their base successfully. Though they had paid the price of over 100 heavenly venerates dying in battle, and more than 2,000 were severely wounded, a great victory still made everyone feel satisfied, and gave rise to a strong confidence. Finally, their only path was not just retreat. They could also stand their ground. After a great victory, everyone hurriedly took advantage of the time to rest and reorganize. Now that they had not given up their base, it also meant that Hysteria's army could possibly launch an attack not too long after. Ling Han's journey could only be postponed indefinitely as well. Present, there was definitely no way he could leave. As expected, only a few years later, Hysteria's army attacked again but was forced back. In the past, there were only Xianxia and the other two great elites, but adding Ling Han and Feng Wuding, two people with sixth-tier battle prowess, now had a tremendous influence on the battle. Within the next 100 years, the Hysteria army would go on to launch over 30 assaults of varying scale. However, they all fell flat, unable to advance a single step. In all these battles, Feng Wuding displayed the best performance of all. It was as though he wanted to prove to everyone that he was the only one who could defeat Hysteria and become the savior of the Genesis world. To that end, he used every ounce of strength in all his battles without holding anything back. In the most recent battle, he released 21-dimensional projections, surpassing Ling Han's previous number of 20. It was obvious Feng Wuding was satisfied with being able to prove that he was better than Ling Han. On the other hand, Ling Han wasn't all too concerned about it. Such contests for pride were pointless. Actual strength in battle was what he cared about. 200 years, 500 years, they had defended against the Hysteria army countless times. In the blink of an eye, 1,000,000 years had passed. Ling Han wasn't going to stop with his decapitation missions. Even though they were now able to withstand the attacks from the Hysteria army, there would be a difference in the number of casualties with and without an intelligent monster taking charge. Ling Han would bring Bai Meifeng, Shen Feng, and Fu Yuan with him. Given his current strength, he was more than capable of guaranteeing their safety, so he thought it would be good to train them a little as well. On the other hand, Feng Wuding was trying to compete with Ling Han on all fronts. He also started his own little guerrilla strike force, taking along 3 members as he continuously killed his way into enemy territory. He wanted to compete against Ling Han on their battle records. However, Feng Wuding didn't have the ability to traverse the void. There were a few times he got trapped by the enemy, and while he was able to escape, his 3 teammates all perished under the encirclement. After repeated failures, it didn't matter if he was the son of destiny of the Genesis world of the last era. There was no heavenly venerate willing to risk their life with him. As a result, Feng Wuding could only try to do things by himself. However, there was one time he fell for the enemy's trap and had to be rescued by Ling Han, Xianxia, and the other generals. After that, he never charged into enemy territory again. It was too embarrassing. Ha ha ha! Bai Meifeng, Xian Feng, and Fu Yuan burst out laughing when they heard the news. They didn't like Feng Wuding to begin with. It was natural they would be ecstatic to see him fail so miserably. To think he dreams of competing against us. I hope he learns his lesson now, Bai Meifeng said. He had always resented Feng Wuding ever since he lost to him. However, because they were equal in terms of cultivation level, Bai Meifeng didn't have any advantage in battle, and thus could not defeat Feng Wuding. Come, let's drink. Fu Yuan raised his cup. Ling Han and the others also raised their cups and clinked them together. They were not within the base at the moment. Instead, they were at a spot about 3 days' journey from it. Originally, this place was just a regular valley, but it had become quite a scenic spot because of the clashing of two dimensions. Bai Meifeng was the first person who discovered it, so he brought Ling Han and the rest over. They also had the Feng Wuding matter to discuss, so it seemed like a good idea to have a drink here and celebrate. That said, Feng Wuding is powerful indeed. If Boss wasn't around, he would be virtually unbeatable by anyone of the same cultivation level. Xian Feng mused. Bai Meifeng and Fu Yuan nodded their heads. They couldn't deny that. There's no helping it. He only has his own luck to blame for being born in the wrong era and meeting our boss. Fu Yuan laughed. Even though both Fu Yuan and Xian Feng were both 5th tiers, they had no qualms about calling Ling Han their boss. One's cultivation level mattered when it came to the realm of martial prowess, but one's strength even more so. Once boss gains another level and becomes a 5th tier, he will have a 7th tier's battle prowess. There'll be no one stopping him then, Fu Yuan said. Even though he was just trying to flatter Ling Han, there was an ounce of truth in it as well. Ling Han was just about to speak up, but he suddenly turned his head, ears perked. What's wrong? Bai Meifeng asked. Ling Han gestured for everyone to keep quiet. After a while, he said, We have a guest. Who? Bai Meifeng and the others asked. It's us. A voice resounded as a plain-looking man casually approached. He had a faint smile on his face, and his eyes were narrowed into slits, as though they couldn't be opened. May I ask who you are? Fu Yuan immediately stood up. Also, you said us? Xian Feng asked. Soon, more figures appeared, each one of them with an imposing presence. 5th tier, 5th tier, 5th tier. These people were all 5th tier heavenly venerates, and there were as many as 88 of them. Each one of them had a terrifying aura. Ling Han swept a glance across. Something I can help you with? We're here to take your life, the plain-looking person said. I take it you're all just like Mengdong and are Hysteria's agents? Ling Han acknowledged them. Indeed, the plain-looking person said. He bowed slightly. I am Huangfu Dongyue. Little brother, I've wanted to meet you for a long time, and now that we have, I must say, it's such a pity. He was implying that if Ling Han hadn't betrayed Hysteria, then they would have been a family, and would have met much earlier. Ling Han laughed. Well, better late than never. Another 5th tier pointed a finger at Ling Han, and rebuked angrily. Ling Han, do you think you can just do as you please after betraying the main body? What? Bai Meifeng, Xian Feng, and Fu Yuan were all taken aback. Judging from the other party's words, it seemed like Ling Han was one of Hysteria's agents, but had switched sides. Ling Han was one of Hysteria's men? The news was too overwhelming. If it were to spread to the realm battlefield, it would be sure to cause a great commotion. Who would dare use one of Hysteria's men? After all, he could suddenly go berserk and stab you in the back. Bai Meifeng looked at Ling Han and asked, Brother Ling Yu? Boss. Xian Feng and Fu Yuan were also astonished. Ling Han casually waved his hand. I'll explain it to you later. There is no later. You are going to die here right now, Huangfu Dongyue coldly remarked. Is that so? Ling Han looked around at the 5th tier heavenly venerates, and couldn't help laughing. It's not that I'm looking down on you all, but to me, you're all nothing more than cannon fodder. I can take you all on with one hand even if you come at me together. Then I'd like to see you try, Huang Fu Dongyue said in a somber tone. He then shouted, "For the main body, our deaths will only return us to the main body." 10 fifth-tier heavenly venerates immediately shouted back, and then leapt forward together. After that, something strange happened as all 10 of them started to fuse together. Their resulting aura skyrocketed, instantly breaking through the limitations of the 5th tier and reaching 6th tier. Bai Meifeng and the rest were flabbergasted. How was this possible? Ling Han had seen it before, so he wasn't surprised. However, he couldn't help frowning. This was their trump card? Hysteria should know that he already had a 6th tier's battle prowess. It didn't matter what kind of combination monster they threw at him. Even if all these people were to fuse together, they wouldn't be able to beat him as long as they didn't reach the 7th tier. 7th tier? That was not possible. Even if Hysteria's body became an entire dimension, it couldn't possibly create a 7th tier combatant. However, these people had sure been hiding themselves for a significant amount of time, and now they were revealing themselves all in one go. Wouldn't this just be a foolish act if they weren't absolutely sure of themselves? Hysteria would never do something so foolish. Moreover, these people had actual intelligence, and naturally wouldn't be so stupid either. Hold on. How did all these people suddenly show up here? For the sake of the main body! Another 10 people shouted loudly, and then fused together, turning into a creature that was 30 meters tall. It had many arms, legs, and eyes, becoming a complete monster. 2 6th-tier monsters. More and more people released loud roars and fused together, and there were more and more 6th-tier monsters. Ling Han sighed. After these people were fused together, they possessed the unique trait of hysteria, and he could not absorb their life essence. This was a pity, but they still had heavenly venerable seals, and these would not disappear with their fusion. This time, he was not going to fall for Hysteria's trick again. After he killed them, he would directly search their souls. Ling Han, it's time for us to return to the main body, Huang Dongyue said. Right now, only he and 7 other people hadn't fused together yet. Ling Han shook his head. Not interested. That's not up to you. Huang Dongyue let out a battle cry, and the 8 6th-tier monsters immediately charged towards Ling Han. First-grade seals lit up, showing astonishing might. 6th-tier battle prowess further boosted with first-grade seals. Just how powerful was this? It really isn't enough. Ling Han was completely unconcerned. Fusion monsters only had the battle prowess of early-stage 6th tier. Even if they were boosted with first-grade seals, they would only be able to reach late-stage 6th tier in terms of battle prowess. Meanwhile, Ling Han had already completely stabilized his cultivation level during these years. His basic power was similarly at the early stage of the 6th tier. He also possessed a first-grade seal as well as 9th and 8th-grade combination seals. Not only was his power not inferior, but it was even stronger. However, there were 8 6th-tier monsters on the opposing side after all. If they worked together, they could still match Ling Han and his group with only a slight disadvantage. Charge! Huang Fu Dongyue and the others also charged towards Bai Meifeng, Fu Yuan, and Shen Feng. The battle royale began. Though Bai Meifeng was a 4th tier, he was a super genius that was not inferior to Xianxia. Moreover, after all these years, he had also reached the peak stage of the 4th tier, and his battle prowess soared to peak stage 5th tier. Not only was he not inferior to Huang Fu Dongyue and the others, he wasn't at a disadvantage even in a battle of 2 against 1. However, Fu Yuan and Shen Feng weren't as powerful. It should be known that Huang Fu Dongyue and the others had all received a first-grade Heavenly Venerable Seal inheritance package from Hysteria. With the boost of more than 80 times of power, they were instantly pushed to their limits. Moreover, Huang Fu Dongyue and the others still had an advantage in numbers. If it weren't for Bai Meifeng continuously rescuing them, Fu Yuan and Shen Feng wouldn't have been able to last this long at all. Even so, they were still in a perilous situation. It was possible that they would collapse at any moment. Ling Han let out a battle cry, and as he exchanged blows with the 8 fusion monsters, He continued to rush towards Fu Yuan and Shen Feng. Boom! He threw out a punch, instantly sending 3 fifth tiers flying and resolving Shen Feng's pressing crisis. However, Fu Yuan was struck by 2 fifth tiers and instantly threw up blood violently. He stumbled, his face as pale as paper. Ling Han hurriedly charged forward. Although the 8 fusion monsters tried their best to stop him, they still couldn't succeed. He stretched out a hand and grabbed out at Fu Yuan. Right at this moment, light suddenly lit up on Fu Yuan's chest. Xiao, xiao, xiao. 3 spots of light flew out and then rapidly enlarged, turning into 3 figures. No, they could not be considered figures but rather 3 monsters, but the aura they exuded was incredibly terrifying. Many arms, many legs, and many heads. These were Hysteria's creations. Furthermore, the aura they exuded was incredibly strong, and had shockingly reached the 6th tier, even stronger than those 8 fusion monsters. They were actually those 3 monsters that had sniped Ling Han in the Genesis world of the last era. Why had they flown out from Fu Yuan's body? Had Fu Yuan been coerced? Or, when he had been completely unaware, these 3 monsters had possessed him? This should not be possible. For better or worse, he was still a 5th tier elite, and even if he was no match for a 6th tier, how could he not have the slightest reaction when 3 6th tier elites had hidden themselves inside his body? Hong! The 3 great 6th tiers attacked, each channeling a 2nd grade seal, which boosted their power by more than 70 times, pressing down on Ling Han. The 8 fusion monsters also took advantage of the opening to make their move. The number of heavenly venerable seals flickering on their bodies instantly reached as many as 10, and their power increased explosively by more than 400 times. These were combination seals. They had not used them previously because they wanted to lull Ling Han into a false sense of security. It should be known that there were a total of over 100 of them, and each of them had a 1st grade seal, which was completely capable of forming a sequence. Now, 3 peak stage 6th tier elites were attacking Ling Han head-on, and there were also 8 other 6th tier elites who were slightly weaker that had been boosted more than 400 times in power. They had also boosted their battle prowess to the peak stage of the 6th tier, and both sides formed a pincer attack. This was a trap, a deadly trap aimed at Ling Han. Everything that had happened previously had all been an act, all for the sake of this moment, to deal a fatal blow to Ling Han. Fu Yuan smiled coldly. Judging by his understanding of Ling Han definitely wouldn't be able to resolve this. Ling Han! Boss! Bai Meifan and Shen Feng both exclaimed in surprise. This seemed to be a dead end. Whether it was Xian Chihu or Feng Wooding in his place, they could only die helplessly. Ling Han also felt his hair stand on ends. This was the battle prowess of a total of 11 peak stage 6 tiers, and every single one of them was stronger than him. Furthermore, it was not just by a bit, either. Their combined force was enough to deal him severe injury. But the more severe the circumstances, the calmer Ling Han became. He felt his fighting spirit rise up from the depths of his heart. This was what was interesting. He released a battle cry. Wang! All the dimensions in his body were released. It was not just 1 or 2, but a total of 200 of them. They were not projections either, but actual dimensions. 200 medium-level dimensions that were extremely close to reaching high-level. What kind of concept was this? So what if they were 6 tiers? Their bodies involuntarily trembled, and their attacks were slightly halted. However, the 6th tier was the 6th tier after all. As power surged, cracks appeared on the 200 dimensions. Taking advantage of this chance, Ling Han leaped and retreated rapidly. He grabbed Bai Meifan and Shen Feng, and then tore a rip into space. He stepped through, and the 200 dimensions were absorbed into his body at the same time. Show! The hole in the void closed up behind him. In the instant that the hole in the void closed up, Ling cast a deep look at Fu Yuan. It was as if he was staring at a dead man. Then he turned around and left resolutely. Shwa! A black shadow whipped over, exuding a terrifying aura that could suppress the ages and destroy the heavens. Hysteria. It was really one move after another. Ling Han had no way out. If he left the void at this moment, he would have to fight against those 11 6th tier elites again. He released a battle cry and channeled all the 8th grade seals at the same time. He burst with his full power to greet this blow from Hysteria. Pong! Instantly, his whole body trembled violently, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Even if Hysteria had only sent out a doppelganger, its power had still reached the peak stage of the 6th tier, and it was even stronger than those subordinates outside. However, Ling Han still managed to block this blow. Hysteria was incomparably cold. Though its first strike had not succeeded, it was completely emotionless. It delivered another attack. The black tentacle swept through the void. Its main body was far away in the realm battlefield, but its attack still easily reached its target. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ling Han had already taken a step. He tore a rip into space again, and instantly exited the void. Hysteria's attack came. This strike had followed him out of the void, and was continuing to whip towards Ling Han. Scram! Ling Han roared loudly, and attacked with both fists. The 200 dimensions were unleashed at the same time, forming an incomparably powerful oppressive force. Finally, Hysteria's tentacle was blasted back.